Good morning. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping notes.
Thank you. Please note that this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website via YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I would remind those in attendance to use your microphones when speaking and remember to switch them off once you've finished. Please also switch any mobiles or laptops to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings, please can everyone leave the room immediately and use the nearest fire exit, but do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point, which is located at the bottom of the car park where the garages are. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have apologies, please?
Certainly. We've received apologies of absence from councillors Matthew Hartman, Joe Riley, Malcolm Wade and Phil Woods, but I understand Councillor Wade may be joining us later in the meeting.
Okay, but he won't be able to talk or vote on the first application if he's not here, to make that clear. Can we confirm the minutes, please, for the 12th and the 14th of May? Okay, accepted. Thank you. Declarations of interest. Oh. Councillor Dowd.
Sorry. Item 3C is in my wards, but I haven't taken part in any negotiations, and I'm not on the parish planning committee either. Thank you.
Okay, we'll commence then with the first application, which is land north of Hightown Road, Hightown Ringwood, application number 21/10042. And you'll find this on page 5 of the agenda. We can go ahead, please, with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, good morning. Before I take you through the presentation, I'll just take you to your update paper if I can. You'll see that since the publication of the agenda, there's been some further representations received. Let me just get it on my screen. There's a further 4 letters have been received, and the matters raised are summarised there on that first page. We've had some further commentary from Ringwood Town Council, which is also summarised, that goes over the page. The applicant has provided some further clarification with regards to what zero carbon means for their homes and their products, with a little bit more expansion to that's within the main agenda paper. And you'll see there's comments there from your strategic housing officers. And finally, towards the end of that page, there's a slight adjustment to the recommendation with regards to the inclusion of the agreement for delivery of an off-site community facility space. Now, that was included within the application recommendation previously when the application was last before you as a committee back in March 2023, and apologies it wasn't included in the recommendation. The requirement for it still remains, so it's just simply adding it on as it is as per Appendix A of your report. There's one further verbal update, if I can just add as well, and it's just correcting a line in the report. It's on page 35 of your report, and it's paragraph 6, 12, 10. On the second line, second word, it says minimum. That should read as maximum. So the applicant is of the view that the affordable housing offer of 28% is the maximum the scheme can deliver. So it's just to correct that minimum to a maximum. I'll take you through the presentation and move to the slides now. So members, this application was before the committee back in March 2023. I'm mindful that membership of the committee has changed since then. Whilst the application members previously resolved to grant permission subject to the 106, the decision wasn't made. The 106 hasn't been completed, and that's one of the reasons it's back before you. The whole application is therefore for consideration. So I will take you through all the slides that the case officer previously took you through. So you'll have sight of the whole application, all the matters. although you'll see from your report, the principal changes since March 2023 relate to some matters of planning policy. The policy landscape has changed. We had the adoption of the neighbourhood plan in Ringwood. And most importantly is the viability exercise that's been undertaken, and the affordable housing offer has changed since March 2023. So you would have seen in your report, the scheme is for 400 dwellings. The current proposal now is for 28% affordable housing. When you considered that, or when the committee considered the scheme in March 23, it was up at 50%. 3 hectares of employment, open space, alternative natural recreational green space, associated footpaths and landscaping. Drainage and enabling works is significant, and you would have seen from the report that that's quite significant abnormal costs with regards to enabling works and infrastructure provision. Some of that is related to delivery of the new 4-arm roundabout on the A31. And there's a second access and a spine road through the site, which you'll see as I take you through the plans. But that's essentially the application proposal. It is made in outline with all matters except for access reserved for future approval. So looking at your application site, shown in red, we're on the east side of Ringwood town, just to the south of the A31. So putting that in a little bit more context, you can see there how it sits. How it sits on the eastern side of the town, and the A31 running east-west, just to the north of the site. And there you can see the application site on the eastern side by aerial photography and its relationship to the town centre, which is more to the west of the town. Looking again just very quickly at the aerial photograph, but zooming in on the application site, you can see it's essentially a cluster of fields. And picking up on some of those key parts of the local geography, so you can recognise where Eastfield Lane is. There's an existing play area. The arrow's slightly long there into the application site. You can pull it back to this rectangular parcel of land, which is an existing play area. Hightown Road running left to right or east to west at the south of the site. And you can pick up on various hedgerow features along the boundaries and also in the middle of the site. Knoll Lane running over to the east. Giving you some context, the application site in pink on the right-hand side, or the eastern side of the site, and how it relates to other infrastructure such as the schools, the town centre, employment provision down at Wellworthy Way. Beaumont Park, or the Ring 3 development, is that orangey yellow colour. And another one of your allocations, another one of the allocations you considered at the back end of last year, SS13, land at Moortown Lane, is white but shown with that dotted boundary. A little bit more context, the application site shown in red, but this is showing its relationship to the National Park, which is the wash of yellow on the right-hand side of the screen there. So you can see how it's right abutting the National Park. The blue is showing water, movement of waterways, and then the pink spots are showing areas of listed buildings. That sort of pinky purple line dissecting the site as a public footpath. So thinking about your policy SS14 allocates the lands for at least 270 new homes with associated access and public open space. The concept master plan from your local plan is on the right-hand side of the screen there, and that browny buff colour is the indicative illustration of how you could deliver the site with residential uses. The slightly lighter green is that of the ANRG and the ecological mitigation. The darker green, if I can call it that, along the west, and the fingers going through the site is part of the open space package and landscape mitigation. At the top, the bluey purple shading on your concept master plan is the land identified for potentially 3 areas of employment provision. So how does the application sit against that allocation? So the plan on the right is the land use parameter plan, and I'll take you through the other parameter plans in a moment, but it sits on this slide quite helpfully alongside the allocation and the concept master plan in the allocation. And you can see the colours are broadly the same in terms of the employment is focused at the north of the site. The buff colour remains with the residential parcels, and the two shades of green picking up on the ANRG on the eastern side adjacent to the national park, and the open space requirements down the right-hand side of the left-hand side, sorry, or the western side, with the green corridors coming through the site and alongside the right-of-way down at the south as well. The application's in outline, as I said, with just access for consideration, but it's accompanied by a suite of parameter plans which give you an idea of how the development will come forward, and certain parameters with regards to the land use, with regards to where the accesses will be and movement strategy, scale of development across the site, and how it all integrates with the landscape. So we're looking to approve these parameter plans, and that will help guide future reserve matter applications and fix certain things. So taking you through those, the first one is the land use plan. You saw that a moment ago when I had it alongside your allocation concept master plan. I'm just picking out on some of the key features. Again, the sort of buff colour is the area identified for residential development, the blue for employment. The grey is that for infrastructure. So you've got the new access roundabout and the spine road that comes through the site down to Hightown Road, of which there's some further off-site works, and I'll take you through these detailed drawings in a moment. The requirement for the western open space and how that integrates with the east-west corridors and providing links through to the ANRG and on towards the national park. You'll see on this particular land use plan, there's a series of circular routes, the green dotted lines in the ANRG to provide the circular routes and different routes to be able to walk. And also the blue shows the indicative locations of the drainage swales. You'll be aware from the report that one of the changes since March 2023 is an adjustment to the parameter plans with regards to some highway England, or national highways as they're called. National highways land has been identified along the northern part of the site, which means it can't be delivered as ANRG or employment land and needs to retain as highway land. And that dark blue wedge in the northeastern corner, that slither alongside the A31, is the land in question. So that's the land that's been taken out of the northern part of the ANRG and the northern part of this eastern employment parcel. And that's going to come grey on the old plan in terms of becoming part of the highway land. In reality, there's probably very little change in that part of the site, because when you're out on site, and it might be clear in the photographs in a moment, I'll try and point it out, is this is part of the embankment for the slip road. You're rising as you come off the A31 up to the roundabout in this location, and it's planted with a hedge and has a verge. So in reality, it's likely that it will stay as that soft landscape feature, but it cannot be included as part of the ANRG or the employment land, and that's the amendment. Looking to the scale and the building heights parameter plan, and that's picking up on the residential parcels and the employment land. Hopefully you can see the detail on the screen. If not, I'll take you through it. The blue is the employment land, as I said, and that has buildings up to 12 metres high along the highway and at key locations. So reasonably significant employment buildings, but as gateway to the site and sitting on lower ground to the A31, you would have read there's a 6 metre difference between the A31 down into the site in this location. And then as you come into the residential parcels, the brown wash is predominantly 2-storey, up to 9.5 metres there. The hatching around the central core and the spine part of the site, and I'll take you through the character areas that are proposed in a moment. Along that central spine and the corridor, there's opportunities for increased height in buildings and some increase in density, which is quite important, I think, in terms of presentation to the road and placemaking. And that can go up to 12 metres at key locations along that spine road. The landscape parameter plan fixes those areas of green open space. Importantly, the ANRG, which picks up on the relationship between the site and the national park. This is also on the higher part of the site. Land does rise very gradually up to the east, so having open space on the eastern side of the site where it's highest, closest to the national park, helps provide that buffer to the setting of the national park and also provides the environmental mitigation that's required. And that has those green corridors and wedges linking through to the other open space. It's a requirement of your policy, you would have seen in the local plan, for the open space to be provided on the western side of the site to provide some separation and an opportunity of buffer to the existing residents in Ringwood. Along the south, there's an opportunity to provide that existing right-of-way to be enhanced and also provide another corridor, green corridor, and there's a slightly more narrow corridor of green planting and buffer around the existing oak cottage at the bottom of the site or southern part of the site. Moving to access and movement in the parameter plan, you would have seen from the report there's two principal accesses into the site. The first one is at the southern part of the site off of Hightown Road. In this location, it's simple priority junction, T-junction, coming into the site at the south, and that will be part of the key spine road running north to south up towards the A31. When you get to the A31, it's proposed to adjust and amend the roundabout to provide the fourth arm into the site, and that will include dropping down into the site, but also, as well as the creation of the access, improvements to the roundabout up here with improved pedestrian crossing facilities and connectivity to the north. So thinking about that access plan and strategy, the two main access points are shown in the circles here, the big circle being the main piece of infrastructure, the A31 access roundabout, the straight line indicatively showing you the spine road that runs through the site, and then the new access onto Hightown Road, which is that simple priority junction in the south. There were two other pieces of quite significant off-site infrastructure works that are included. One is an adjustment to the Crow Lane Hightown Road junction, which is circled here. You can see that's also within the application site red edge, so it's part of the access provisions to deliver the Hightown Road access down here. And then further away, up at Southampton Road and its junction with the eastbound A31 on slip, there's proposed junction improvements here. You would have read in your Appendix A, the report from March 2023 of the report. There were two other junctions which are shown in red here, which are identified in the transport statement as having some capacity issues when the site comes forward. Both with background growth, they're already going to struggle, and if you add the site on without these junctions, there is some capacity issues. But what the transport modelling says, and the Highway Authority have agreed to, is by providing the north-south spine road and the two junctions as an alternative to Eastfield Lane, the delivery of this infrastructure will actually help ease the pressure and the capacity problems at these two junctions. So there's no improvements required or proposed at those two junctions, because the other infrastructure here will in turn help ease the capacity and the use of Eastfield Lane by providing an alternative north-south route. Sitting at the top of the site, the northern part of the site, and looking at the A31 access, I mentioned this is providing a new fourth arm coming south off of the existing roundabout into the site with improved pedestrian crossing facilities. So you've got the A31 running east to west here, and the existing off-slip raises up. And I mentioned, and it's in the report, there's a 6-metre difference between the road here down into the application site. You can see here some of that planting on the verge and the embankment, which is part of the land that's under the National Highways control. But moving in and looking at the application access to the north, proposed new southern arm off the roundabout, and you'll see here there's also in the buff colour, the yellow colour, a 3-metre wide footpath on the south-eastern side, coming up towards the off-slip to the A31, with an uncontrolled crossing facility on this side to an island, and then again uncontrolled across to a 3-metre wide cycle shared pedestrian cycle path on the north side. If you're coming out of the application site on the west side, another 3-metre cycle path along the A31 slip, but this time improved pedestrian crossing we've got a controlled toucan crossing on this side. So there's a controlled crossing and a means of getting across to get onto the north side of the A31. A detail just to show you from within the site. So this is at the northern element of the residential parcel, and looking back towards the A31, you get a feel here for the level change, the land rising up towards the A31 in the distance here, and perhaps an idea of some illustrative artwork of what the employment land might look like with some gateway buildings as you come into the site. But it's really just to show that level change and how there's quite significant work to get up to the A31. So looking at the current roundabout and working through the photographs, the one on the left-hand side here is if you're coming from Southampton towards Bournemouth and you've come off, so this is heading westwards. The A31 is running off to the right-hand side of the photograph. The application site is on the left-hand side. So you feel the slip road rising up, and the car in the middle there is on the existing roundabout. So just to the left of that car will be where the new spur, the new arm comes off to the left into the application site. The middle photograph is the other side. So this is looking back eastwards towards the existing roundabout. The land falls away from the photographer, and the previous photograph was taken over there where my cursor is. So the application site on the right-hand side here, and the new spur arm from the roundabout will come off on the right-hand side. And then on the right-hand side photograph, you have a photograph looking south from the bridge on top of the A31, looking back towards the application site. So this is the roundabout in the middle, and the new arm for the roundabout will continue straight across in the middle ground of the photograph. So the application site sitting on the lower ground, but effectively directly in front of you. Moving to the southern part of the site and the southern site access, the Hightown Road, Crow Lane access proposals. This is the existing arrangement. So you'll see here as point of reference, you've got the Elm Tree Pub, you've got Hightown Road running east to west, then you've got Crow Lane heading off there to the south. Slightly unusual in that there's 2 points of access onto Hightown Road, almost with a little bit of a service lane here, and the main priority junction onto Hightown Road. There's also a access to the footpath in this bottom corner, southwestern corner of the application site. You can see the desire line and the path route. So there's a stile just next to the pub in this location. You can see there's limited footpath facilities along this particular part of Hightown Road. There are paths as you head back towards the west and on the Crow Lane side. So the application site shown in red on the right-hand side, and I'll zoom in on this plan in a moment, but you'll be mindful from earlier, I think, that it covers the application site, the 2 potential, or the 2 junction points. It's got the new access into the site, which is this higher circle in black, and the alterations to the Crow Lane, Hightown Road junction here. So what's proposed, that link into the public right-of-way is your sort of context point in this location, central in this plan, and the Elm Tree Public House sitting just to the left or the west of that. So on the north side of Hightown Road, from the pub, there's a proposed new footpath that will run along to the site access, will run eastwards, and then the new simple priority junction into the application site. That's the southernmost access point. There's also a crossing facility, uncontrolled crossing facility, just outside the public house, which comes to the south side of Hightown Road and Crow Lane. And you'll see here that second junction, the lesser of the 2 junctions that I mentioned, I think I called it a service lane a minute ago, is to be closed off with a new verge created with some improved pedestrian cycle facilities, and just have the 1 junction onto Hightown Road. So looking at the existing arrangement, and you can see the first photograph on the left here is from Crow Lane looking north. There's the Elm Tree Pub, and the application site over onto the right-hand side. And this is that service road I talked about, or how I described it, but the secondary road, and that's the part of the highway that will be stopped up and closed with the simple 1 junction onto Hightown Road with improved crossing points along Hightown Road. In the middle, you've got at the junction with Crow Lane, you've got the end of the public house, shown with the brickwork here, the access to the public right-of-way. So this is the application site in the sort of the right-hand 2/3 of the application, of the photograph, sorry, and the proposed access just off to the right-hand side. And then the top right-hand photograph is from Hightown Road, looking back in a westwards direction. So this is Crow Lane off to the left. This immediate part of the highway in the foreground is the bit that's to be closed, with this primary Crow Lane access being the one in the middle ground. Elm Tree Pub is just off to the right-hand side. This is the access to the pub here in terms of the position. Looking along Hightown Road itself, so this is the Elm Tree Pub is off in the distance. We've walked down Hightown Road, turn around and looking back in a westwards direction. So the proposed access in approximately this location here. And then the house in white is the same group of houses here. So we walk back the other way, and the access point in approximately this location. And the same on the right-hand side. The next couple of slides, I'm taking you north of the application site up to the Southampton Road junction. And this is the junction with the A31 eastbound on slip, which I think I did show as one of the circles in the highway and access movement strategy slide. So you've got the existing Southampton Road coming from the A31. A31 is running east to west just off the photograph here, with the new improved roundabout. And you head over the A31, you head north into the northern part of Ringwood. And here there's a junction which doesn't have great pedestrian cycle connectivity and infrastructure provision, and the transport statement in support of the application and with the Highway Authority's agreement as well required some improvement to this junction. So the proposal is to take away that priority arrangement and install a new roundabout in terms of coming north on Southampton Road, being able to turn right onto Southampton Road and on to the A31 eastbound. This provides improved crossing points on Southampton Road on all sides of the roundabout, so it makes getting across and heading north into Poorna a lot more easy for those on pedestrian, cycle and non-car modes. This is looking at that arrangement. So you've got the footpath on the side of Southampton Road, the western side. Very difficult to cross at the moment, and then the traffic arrangement with traffic turning right to get onto the A31 in this location. So it's considered that with those limited crossing facilities, there's an opportunity to enhance the PED cycle provision and infrastructure as a result of changing this arrangement, as well as building in the capacity. Moving to the site and how it relates to the other facilities around the town, the application site in the middle end red there, and you can see how it relates to other facilities. There's employment shown, there's retail shown, there's leisure, the town centre is shown as well. It's clearly an allocation in your plan, and it's considered to be a sustainable location through that allocation. And there's connectivity to other parts of the town. So these are some of the routes from the application site that you can use to get into the town centre and some of the other amenities such as the schools. You would have read in Appendix A to the report back from March 2023, there's a number of off-site pedestrian improvements, pedestrian cycle improvements to try and facilitate that connectivity to the town centre and other amenities in the town, to try and make sure that people are encouraged to use modes other than the car. So there's a number of pedestrian crossings to be improved, drop curbs to be provided, tactile paving and ramps at various locations. There's potentially a link into Ash Grove on the right-hand side using the park, and you'll see in a moment when we look at the western open space, there's an opportunity to tie two open spaces together and create a space in this location. And one of the bus stops along Eastfield Lane is proposed to be relocated to provide that and link in with that connectivity. The Southampton Road roundabout change to a roundabout is the junction detail I just showed you a couple of slides ago, and there's further off-site works to the north to create better pedestrian cycle crossing facilities. You would have read in your report the public transport strategy comprises two parts, and there is a slight change to the strategy from that which was before you in March 2023. And that is essentially with regards to the second bullet point on this slide. The Ringo service was initially intended to be improved and extended to account for early hours and later hours in the day, and also to provide a Sunday service. The bus operator has made it clear that that's not a service they're actually able to deliver at this point in time. They do have aspirations to divert a service through the site when the spine road's in, so that's a positive, and the route is sustainable and can be delivered. But in the absence of being able to deliver that early Ringo improvement for early hours, similar to the approach that was taken on Moortown Lane SS13, and tying in with that strategy, the County Council as Highway Authority are accepting of a taxi share service for those earlier times of the day and also at the weekends. So moving to character design and the location of various pieces of infrastructure on the site. Members need to be mindful that the application is made in outline, so you're only dealing with access. All other matters are reserved, but as I said when I took you through the parameter plans, there are certain things we can fix now to make sure we have an acceptable and appropriately designed scheme that comes forward and meets all the requirements of the strategic allocation. And the case officer, when he took you through this back in March 2023, made the point that through negotiation, your officers with the applicant, your officers have secured quite a lot of additional detail over and above what might normally come with an outline application because of the importance of the site, because of its relationship to the eastern edge of the town and the national park. And hopefully the next couple of slides I'll take you through how we have tried to secure some of that quality, albeit at an early outline stage. And obviously the devil is in the detail, and that will come through the reserved matters as we go forward. But you'll see on the slide here, there's the Western Public Open Space. So that's part of your policy requirement, and you can see that's a reasonably substantial piece of open space along the western edge. It relates to that open space I touched on a minute ago when I talked about Elm Grove. Also, it provides a buffer to the back of the Eastlands Lane property in this location. Part of the infrastructure package is the delivery of the green open space and the connectivity through the site of the green wedges or the green fingers, the corridors running east to west, and how that all ties to the ANRG over on the eastern side of the site. The central spine is going to be a really important part of infrastructure in the site. Not only infrastructure for capacity road terms, as I talked about easing pressure on a couple of other junctions in the town, but in terms of placemaking. So that corridor is really important, and you'll see in a moment on a couple of other slides, the applicant has put forward details to make sure we've got pedestrian cycle facility, verges, tree-lined streets, all matters that are encouraged by the NPPF in terms of creating new communities and new places. The applicant has done some work looking at existing character areas when they're looking to try and define the character for the application site. Being really sensitive to the national park over on the eastern edge, and how we have to make sure we have development that can assimilate with the town, but also that transition from the edge of the town into the national park, that's really important. And the applicant has looked at the existing character areas of the surrounding development. And you can see Ashgrove, there are some quite higher density parcels in the town, slightly lower density and looser along Eastfield Lane and along Hightown Road. Forest Lake Gardens, again, maybe a little bit higher than Hightown Road, but not as high as Ashgrove. And then we've also got the Ring 3 Beaumont Park. So there's various mixture of densities and scale and arrangement of properties, and the applicant has taken all that into account when they've been looking to try and provide some parameters for the application. Looking at some of those character areas, Hightown Gardens, sort of 1960s architecture, very domestic, two-storey in its form. Oak Cottage is the house on the south side on the southern edge of the site, north side of Hightown Road. Knoll Lane, this is over in the National Park, so we're very rural and agricultural in character. And other properties on Hightown Road, there's a mixed bag along Hightown Road of predominantly detached and semi-detached, but two-storey generous houses. As you move along towards Ring 3, the Beaumont Park, so this is the Linden Homes scheme. You can see two-storey development again. Some of that goes up to 2.5 or 3-storey in this location, so there are higher buildings within the vicinity of the site. You've got open space, you've got verges, you've got planting, articulation of detailed chimneys are all included. There's tile hanging, there's various brickwork details as you turn corners. So in terms of a place, the Linden Home Scheme at Beaumont Park is one that the applicant has looked at. And the report, specifically Appendix A, talks about how that has a degree of success. Ash Grove, I mentioned when I showed you the coloured plan a minute ago, so slightly higher density in terms of proximity of building to buildings, but all 2-storey residential. And of its time, at a time when there was wide verges, areas of open space, quite open plan in terms of the street form. Then you've got some other examples along Forest Lake Avenue. Eastfield Lane, I mentioned, is a mixture of architectural styles, but slightly looser and lower density. So how does that all translate into the application proposals? One of the plans we have is a density plan, and there's density considered in your report, specifically on page 83. That's going back into the March 2023 report. And you'll see here, and I've talked about the spine road, the importance of the spine road in placemaking terms. And it's in that location, there's an opportunity for some slightly higher density buildings. The orange is medium density, and then the yellow is shown as the lower density. Within the report, within Appendix A, the overall density of the site comes out around 35 dwellings per hectare. It clearly won't be a uniform density across the site. You'll have lower densities along that outer edge, and that will change and get slightly higher along the central core. But it's comparable with the overall densities that have been delivered elsewhere in the locality, specifically at Beaumont Park. The devil will be in the detail, and that will come forward through the reserve matters. And when you create your place, there's opportunities to articulate buildings in those higher density places, which can still be quite beneficial in terms of placemaking. And I'll take you through some of the character work, the illustrative and indicative work the applicant has done now to try and show you what that could look like and how it still works. The main character areas are the Green Walk on the western side, Spine Road, Spine Street I've talked about, and then Knoll View and the Park Edge. Those are the way the applicant has defined the character of the site. So that would reflect the medium density in Green Walk, maybe the higher density in Spine Street, medium again to the eastern side of the Spine Street, and then the lower density for the edge, the Park Edge, looking out towards the National Park. So working from the west through to the east, the Green Walk character area, we're looking at buildings of 2 stories in height, so that will reflect the properties on the existing town to the west, predominantly detached and semi-detached, so again giving you a looser, slightly lower density spatial feel. Dwellings are fronting onto the open space. That western corridor open space is really important, but you'll see also giving them some front gardens and some defensible space before it's not all hard back up against the road. Changes in surfacing in terms of access drives and roads again helps assimilate the development into that open space and the wider town. So the slightly lower density or the medium density part of Green Walk. And you can see the buildings will have active frontages looking onto the open space and how that all connects through to the open space and the usability of the space. Hopefully with trees along the open space, but we also see pockets of green and trees planted in the built form as well. So helping frame views, helping provide greenery in what is a suburban environment. And I talked earlier about the NPPF talking about street trees being important. Securing that sort of detail when we come to looking at the detailed reserve matters are going to be really important to making sure the scheme works. The Spine Street is the slightly higher, is the higher density part of the site, and the detail here will be really important. You can see we've got a wide verge on the edge of the road here, as well as pedestrian cycle facilities on both sides. Tree-lined streets with the sort of the autumnal orange colours for the trees here. Really important, again, positive from the framework, the NPPF, which encourages delivery of tree-lined streets. And you can see how it all knits together on the right-hand side with regards to connectivity of these green corridors running through the site. buildings fronting the open space and being active. And it's these L-shaped buildings, potentially, the stars showing that these are opportunities for feature buildings, focus points. These are where you might have your flats or your apartment buildings, so higher buildings that are addressing the road, articulation in their architecture to make sure they're focus points and helping to deliver that sense of place. And then as you move out to the east, this is into the park edge, so the lower density part of the application site, facing out over to the ANRG, facing out over to the national park, the development becomes even looser and lower density. So here we are down to essentially detached houses. It's not even the semis anymore, more space between them. Front gardens again, parking between the houses. So again, you get greater separation in terms of visibility and separation. Looking out over the open space, looking out over the hedges and tree-lined road again and connecting into the open space. So actively fronting open space, but also very much looser with a maximum 2-storey height to try and make sure we can transition from the town out to the ANRG and out onto the national park. The green corridors are mentioned in Appendix A to your main committee report, so the March 23 committee, as being really important in terms of creating that connectivity east-west through the site. We don't want to have green corridors that are just small strips, narrow areas of space that don't really do much. So the applicant has given detail and done some work where they've looked at how buildings are going, again, to be fronting onto those spaces, but more importantly, making sure we get a decent separation between buildings. So these corridors are 25 metres, a minimum of 25 metres in width. So you can get decent amount of light into there, decent connectivity and infrastructure to make sure that people can get east-west without feeling like they're walking through a narrow corridor or an uninviting space. And that helps provide, again, more greening and greening the urban or suburban environment and makes it a nice place to live. Looking at the employment area to the north, I took you through the density, the scale and the building heights plan earlier. There's an opportunity here for buildings to front onto the road and provide a gateway building. There's clearly the level change from the A31 down into the site. But essentially the building blocks here will be along the road. The buildings will sit alongside the road and will frame views and will work in courtyard arrangements with frontages and landscaping to the edges of the road with parking and infrastructure to the rear. That's certainly the intention. Moving to flooding and surface water drainage, you would have read in your Appendix A, and I'm going to turn up the report for this one, I think. Yep. You would have read in Appendix A that at the moment, surface water flood water transitions across the site. So the plan on the left-hand side here is showing the current travel of water across the site. So it moves from the northeast through the site down to the northwest. And you can see the contours here. So the higher part of the site on the east, and it moves across to the lower side. You can see the smaller or lighter blue arrows show the existing water courses on the site in these locations as well. The plan on the right-hand side, the red shows you the southern end of the site, so down here, and how everything ties together and relates to water courses that go off-site and further south. So you would have read in your report how water at the moment transitions across the site, and the application and the report acknowledges that the site contributes to some of the impact of water moving off-site to the south. Again, the yellow here is the wash of the National Park Authority. So the applicant has to think of a way to grapple with what do we do with the water that's coming across our site, as well as mitigating the impact of development on our site. And what the applicant's going to do, I'm going to turn up specifically page 13 of your agenda, paragraph 6.3.10, which quotes back from the main Appendix A, that the proposal is for the lowering of some of the banks of the on-site water courses, and that's done in combination with the lowering of the land on the site to create additional flood storage. Elsewhere on the site, ground levels are going to be raised in areas surrounding that strategic flood mitigation to ensure that there's swales and basins where floodwater can be held and its movement appropriately managed through the site. So they'll raise the land levels where the housing is going to be, so the houses are in safe location, and you would have read that essentially they move into flood zone 1. And there's mitigation provided by changing the ground levels and lowering some of the ground levels, increasing capacity for the storage of water in other areas, specifically along the ANRG over on the eastern side of the site. So these gives you an idea of the basins for the flood water capture. The strategy here hasn't changed since March 2023. You have no objection from the Environment Agency and no objection from the County Council with their lead local flood authority role. Cross-section detail gives you an example of where the ground level, the green dotted line is the existing ground level, is potentially going to be lowered to provide that additional storage capacity for the holding of flood water. And that all sits over on the eastern side of the site, and there's some more images coming forward. The applicant also has to grapple with not only that movement of water across the application site, but what happens when you put up to 400 homes and 3 hectares of employment land on the site. There's going to be surface water from roofs, from hard surfaces, and that needs to be managed in addition to trying to deal with the flood risk of water coming across the site. And all that knits together with a strategy and delivery of SUDS features, Sustainable Urban Drainage System. And those features are shown on the site in a number of other landscape swales. You can see there's some use of those through the green corridors and along the western corridor as well. And that all knits together with the ANRG landscape mitigation and flood strategy as well. I mentioned earlier that the application is an outline, yet we've pushed the applicant to give us a significant amount of detail, maybe over and above what you would get with a planning application in an outline. But the flooding issue was of such significance and remains so that we have tried to push the applicant into giving us as much detail as we can. And you get a feel now for the size of some of these swales, how they might look in terms of their shape, how they might look in terms of some of their depth, and then also how they function. So you can see some illustrative details here. This one's along the western boundary of the site, so on the edge of Ringwood. And this is one of the surface water basins, and you can see how it's going to be assimilating into the landscape. Controlled then in terms of water being held and using hydraulic systems to make sure that the discharge into the main off-site watercourse is going to be no worse than the greenfield runoff rate, so the rate without any development on site. And if anything, there is an opportunity for betterment by slowing the water down and holding it. And that's set out again in your Appendix A to the report. So taking you through some of the other examples, this is towards the southern part of the site. So this is down by the Elm Tree Pub. So this is almost at the lowest point of the site, down in the southwestern corner. Again, further details at this stage of cross sections. The actual final detail of the arrangement of the landscape, the arrangement of the swales and basins is going to be secured through reserve matters, and we've got planning conditions and obligations to also ensure that the flood works are provided, delivered, managed and maintained to ensure they function as they're intended to. On the right hand side here, you'll see there's a number of cross sections shown alphabetized as you go through the site, and these are again cross sections through the various swales and SUDS basins, so you can see where the existing ground levels are, where you can see additional flood storage capacity has been or is proposed to be created, but also maybe where some of the land has been built up relative to the edges of those swales to try and make sure that the proposed development is protected and is safe for its lifetime. Moving on to loss of features, there is going to be a loss of some of the verge on the northern side and the embankment to create the access. That's inevitable, but the 6 metre difference between the A31 down into the site means you'll get a new embankment on the road and new opportunities for new planting and new opportunities for new landscaping. And there is some adjustment or some removal of some hedgerow on the eastern side to facilitate the flood mitigation measures and delivery of the ANRG. And you saw in the photographs when I was looking at Hightown Road, there's a hedge along Hightown Road and there's clearly going to have to be a partial removal there to facilitate the new access. I've talked a lot about the ANRG and how it is intended to function relative to its relation to the National Park and drainage, but also we need to look about how it relates and ties into the green corridors and how the delivery of other infrastructure. The ANRG is an alternative natural recreational green space to try and encourage people to use those areas for leisure, recreation, walking the dog, rather than perhaps going to other sensitive habitats like the forest. So there's a series of circular walks and routes and attractive routes in the ANRG, but that all ties into the green corridors where there's provision of play, there's provision of flat grass land for kickabout spaces and open spaces. This particular one over here on the western side relates to the existing open space on the edge of the town, and I talked about how that could potentially tie in and create a larger space. Also helps provide a buffer along this western side between the existing residents of the town and the new residents of this new community. I talked a minute ago about the ANRG providing circular routes, and there's different landscape treatment in terms of meadows and different grasslands, mown paths, laid paths, all trying to create an attractive space and to achieve ANRG, the function of the ANRG. And this is just looking back at the western open space in a little bit more detail, showing you how some of those areas relate to the edge of the town and how they relate to the drainage and how they relate to the spine road. So again, there's that extension to the existing open space in this location. You can see there it's potentially 30 metres wide and 110 metres long. So it's a significant parcel of open space in terms of a buffer to the eastern edge of the town. Moving to heritage, there's specific chapters in your report in Appendix A that deal with all the heritage environment. Heritage, specifically page 87, I think, is of your report. And you can see here there are a number of listed buildings which are circled that have a relationship to the site and need to be considered. The stars, I understand, are the non-designated heritage assets, so still of importance and worthy of consideration. The strategy is such that those buildings are essentially provided some buffer in terms of their setting by the provision of the open space in proximity to those heritage assets. Thinking about ecology, when you change the number of open fields on the edge of the forest to a new community, there's going to be an implication. The proposed development is going to provide a BNG uplift, so there will be a net gain, and that will be both a mixture of on-site and off-site. We will look to protect trees and hedgerows where necessary across the site through the development process, but there's also an opportunity for creation of spaces, creation of habitat through the significant open space, the SUDs, the structural plant and the ANRG, and then at the end there's also an opportunity to incorporate biodiversity enhancement in the buildings themselves. Affordable housing, I touched on it right at the very start in my introduction to the application. The proposal is now offering 28% affordable housing. That's down from the 50% that was considered by the committee back in March 2023. That does, however, deliver up to 112 affordable dwellings, bearing in mind it's up to 400 homes. There's a policy compliant tenure mix, which meets your HOU2 requirements, but you would also see in the report there's only 45% of the units are to be small homes. There's a requirement in your development plan policy for the neighbourhood plan R5 for at least 50%, or I think this is more than 50%, so you need 51%. Neighbouring amenity, when you're adding an extension to an existing settlement, you need to think about the relationships with existing properties, and I've tried to highlight some of those for you already, but showing you now, you've got the western open space provides a separation buffer between the edge of the town along Eastfield Lane. The employment being sited in the north also provides a buffer for future residents in terms of residential amenity with regards to the A31 traffic noise. When we get into detailed reserve matters design of these parcels, we can think about building orientation, garden orientation, and how houses are laid out to make sure they are generating adequate living environments. But having the employment land to the north will also provide a bit of a buffer to those the amenity of the proposed new residents. And then having the ANRG and open space over on the eastern side of the site provides a buffer to those houses in the national park along Knoll Lane. I did mention there's a corridor around the existing properties on the northern side of Hightown Road to the south as well, in terms of some separation to the proposed development. I've nearly got through the slides, so thank you for your patience. Just a couple of photographs. You saw right at the start, the aerial photography showed it as a series of paddocks and fields. So this is just looking at that to give you an idea of where we're at. So this is from Knoll Lane on the east side looking back west, and then from the A31 Split Road looking south. From the public right of way in the southwest corner, so just from the Elm Tree pub behind me, looking out into the site. And then looking from the east back west from Knoll Lane. So, Chairman, you would have seen from your report, there's a requirement here in this application for members as decision maker to consider the tilted balance, paragraph 11D of the MPPF. We are in a position where our housing land supply is not a particularly good one, and this will make a significant contribution to the 5-year land supply. The site is allocated, and this provides 130 up to 130 homes above that minimum 270 in your local plan. It would meet the definition of sustainable development, as you see in the concluding paragraphs of the tilted balance, and it will provide 28% affordable homes. There's an opportunity for 3 hectares of employment and significant amounts of green infrastructure. Public transport is going to be improved, and I've already taken you through the fact that the Spine Road would actually help relieve some areas of capacity and congestion on nearby roads. So in summary, without taking through all the details, the recommendation is one of permission, and it's for the prior completion of the legal agreement as per the agenda paper and the update, where I've added in the bit about the community facility space provision and the series of conditions that are in your report. And on that basis, Chairman, I have nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mark, for an excellent report. We have several speakers. Mrs. Janet Piper, who is the agent, you will have 3 minutes. Mr. Michael Stilton and Mrs. Janet Giorgio, objectors, you'll have 1.5 minutes each. Councillor Jeremy Heron, Ringwood South Ward, you'll have 3 minutes. And Councillor Philip Day, Ringwood Town Council, you will have 3 minutes. So we'll first go to Mrs. Janet Piper, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm Jane Piper, the planning consultant for this application. Taylor Wimpey has worked hard with your officers and the statutory consultees before and after the committee's resolution to grant permission over 2 years ago to bring forward this allocated site to meet adopted local plan policies, and particularly policy SS14. This strategic allocation forms an important part of the council's housing land supply to provide much needed new homes for its residents, particularly within the context of the government policy to build more homes and the district not having a 5-year housing land supply. Since the resolution to grant permission, Taylor Wimpey reran the viability of the proposal due to increasing material costs, market changes and high abnormal infrastructure costs associated with the proposal. As such, the viability has been considered, and in accordance with policies HOU2 and IMPL1, this has been taken into account. The site will provide 112 new affordable homes to meet those needs on the waiting list, and that is supported, as you will see, by the supplementary information by your strategic housing officer. We have also submitted updated ecology surveys and reviewed the flood modelling, which remains robust. The EA has confirmed that its position of no objection. Taylor Wimpey is committed to the creation of a high-quality, sustainable new neighbourhood that is of Ringwood for Ringwood, and that will come through the reserve matters. The application has been designed first and foremost to protect the New Forest, meet the ANRG, open space, drainage and ecology requirements, as well as optimising BNG and phosphate mitigation on site. Over 43% of the application, of the outline application is green space. This will increase with gardens and incidental green space in the buff-coloured zones. Through this master plan process, Taylor Wimpey has also been able to make efficient use of this sustainable non-green belt site in line with national policy. As such, the application does exceed the minimum housing target in policy SS14, but in doing so helps to make up some of the shortfall from the allocated sites not coming forward. The application includes a suite of sustainability measures, including zero carbon ready homes, PV solar panels and electric vehicle charging points for all homes. Taylor Wimpey has worked hard with highways and others to create a package of sustainable and active travel solutions, including footpaths and cycleways on and off-site and funding to improve local bus services, as well as providing the new spine road and roundabout, which will ease traffic on Eastfield Lane and in the wider area and improve air quality. In addition to all the infrastructure, mitigation, management and funding, Taylor Wimpey is also providing SIL payments for wider community benefits, ensuring existing residents further benefit from this development. As such, we hope you agree with that this proposal is worthy of receiving permission in line with your officer's recommendation. We look forward to working with officers and the Town Council to design the reserve matters.
Thank you. Mr. Michael Stilton, Mrs. Janet Giorgio, are you splitting it half, 1.5 minutes each? Okay, if you'd like to go ahead, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. My main issue concerns the inclusion in the outline application of a specific number of dwellings, 400, without any drawings being submitted as to how they may be accommodated on the site. Outline applications are designed to establish the acceptability of the principle of developments. Illustrative details can be provided. None have been in this instance to cover the whole site. Detailed applications or reserve matter submissions are the appropriate avenues for approving the layouts and designs of, in this instance, 400 dwellings. As yet, nobody knows whether 400 properties can be satisfactorily accommodated on this particularly sensitive area of land. The applicants have dealt with the industrial element in the appropriate manner by referring to the area of land to be so used. The number of industrial units is not indicated, which is right and proper. Please do not be hoodwinked by the reference of up to. This is quite clearly an application for 400 dwellings, and your planning officer opened his very useful and helpful talk by saying it is a scheme for 400 dwellings. So that is how we must consider it. I believe that it is not appropriate to have that as part of the description of the development. And I think it would raise issues of judicial reviews and other challenges should it remain as part of that description. So, Chairman, I would ask you to give very careful consideration to being committed to approving a subsequent approval of reserve matters for 400
Thank you. You do
dwellings.
need to hand over. You've had more than your time. Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay. Some 10 years ago, despite a wave of flood-related objections, the Beaumont estate, 30 metres away from the current site, was built on land given a confident flood zone 1 designation by the EA. Since then, the Beaumont estate has suffered 2 major flooding events, and consequently, the EA have now upgraded the whole of that site to a flood risk 3, meaning that the residents can no longer get competitive insurance for their properties and are having difficulty selling. They have no redress and nobody cares. This current development proposal was on land for which the evidence of flood risk is far higher. Surely this cabinet will not make the same mistake again. At the very least, it should protect the future families of the proposed 400 houses by insisting the developer provides an indemnity against flooding. After all, the developer has been given approval to proceed on assurances that the flood mitigation measures are adequate. If, as is in the case of the Beaumont estate, the developer's assertions prove to be over-optimistic, it should not be the innocent families desperate for decent houses who pay for the price. If the developer refuses to include a guarantee of indemnity, point out that he can insure against any flooding event, which he, in any case, is confident won't happen. If he says he can't find an insurer who will accept the risk, which is probable given homeowners in the area are finding the price of home insurance prohibitive, surely there should be a further pause of thought. Given the Beaumont estate experience and the well-founded opposition of the Ringwood Town Council, it would surely be wrong to expose some 400 families to risk without any protection. So please insist the developer provides a 10-year guarantee of full compensation for homeowners in the event of any damage caused by flooding.
Thank you. You have
After all-
gone over your time. Thank you. Councillor Heron, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. If they want to think of a name for it, Atlanta would be a good name for this development, but I won't dwell on that one. First of all, I'd like to raise the concern of the road and the say I really do consider that to be a serious risk to life because they have no way of understanding the level of traffic that's going to come down that road, and those green crossing points they just terrify me, to be quite honest. But what I want to refer to is the proposal to defer the slip road till the 200th dwelling was built. I've mentioned this before. I think it's worthy to be mentioned again. This council has a history of making good deals with developers like that, and I always refer you back to the Lymington site at Webb Chicken and how well we have done with the introduction of the railway bridge. This looks really nice, don't you think? Now, I've struggled with that one because time has gone on and it's quite an old example. But thank you to our planning committee, we've got a new example, and it is your next application where a promise by a developer to put infrastructure in at a later date is once again going to be reneged upon. So I really do ask you, please, we cannot have that condition put in. We cannot defer it. Or, if we are going to defer it for the 200th dwelling, why don't we have a subsequent application immediately after this one where they ask to change that until the 350th dwelling? Because we know it's coming. It'll just save time for everyone coming back here. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Day.
Good morning. I'm Philip Day, Chair of the Planning Committee at Ringwood Town Council. I did prepare a written submission, which I hope you've all had an opportunity to look at, and I'm not going to repeat it. I want to deal with the main points, and the first one is the Ringwood Plan, Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan Policy R10, which relates to energy efficiency, zero carbon and the like. I note that in their presentation, Taylor Wimpey said that they would be zero carbon. Yes, but not until 2030, according to the additional papers. Yes, thank you for the PV panels and the electric vehicle points, but where are the heat pumps, ground or air source? There are none of them. This is not compliant with policy R10, which is not a Ringwood policy, it's your policy that applies to Ringwood. And I want to deal with the viability mix. I find it somewhat ironic that we are considering this on the day that the government announces 39 billion towards building affordable houses, a vast sum of money. The chair of the National Housing Federation has welcomed this and says that the government understands the importance of affordable homes, which is not just about having somewhere to live, but can also lower the welfare bill, boost the economy and create jobs against a background of ever-increasing numbers on the waiting list. This is a one-way street which is downhill with respect, Madam Chair. If you agree at this stage to drop from 50% to 28%, then when reserve matters come forward, there is likely to be a further viability study to take that down even more and even more. Circumstances change, and by the time, and heaven knows how much longer it's going to take, that a detailed application comes before you, who knows? Land values might have changed. The selling prices of houses may have changed. the economic situation in terms of building materials, labour will all change. It is premature to agree this. You should remain with your 50% policy compliant requirement, and if necessary, review it again at the reserved matters stage. I'm also very concerned about the same point that Councillor Heron went. You've got two junctions there on Eastfield Lane that are not coping. The thought of having several years of construction traffic whilst those first 200 houses are built is, well, it's beyond words. You should make them build that slip road before a single brick is put in the ground in terms of any houses. Thank you, Ma'am.
Thank you very much. Members, questions please to officers or speakers. Councillor Davies.
Thank you. I'm pretty much in tune with the affordable housing and viability side of things, as I've dealt with that quite a lot. I'm not as up to speed on the flooding. Councillor Georgiou, would you be able to explain a bit more about the flooding issues there?
Yes. A few years ago, I live on the hill that where nobody's noticed this, but the hill actually comes from the forest edge, comes down straight onto that piece of land. And talking to various neighbours, new springs have popped up, fields were sodden. This is on the hill. All that water flows down onto the piece of land. The Elm Tree pub has flooded twice. Recently in 2023, the first one was 2014, 186,000 litres were pumped out of it then. So I actually started to talk to people, went down to Acefield Lane, talked to people on the hill, etc. We then met the Hampshire Flood Lead and asked for, given that things have changed in the last 4 years, if we could have a section 19 on the hill, because that is where the water is coming from. And they've said no, because they're looking at the whole of Ringwood in 26-27 due to the fact that things have changed. Now, we were promised, I've lived there for 26 years, when the Beaumont estate was built, everyone who lived there said, please don't build there. I mean, just don't. It floods, it's not what you think it is. You know, the Environment Agency look more at fluvial flows, as in, you know, streams, whereas surface water is the main problem around here. Not only does it sort of flow into Crow Stream, it flows, you know, it just makes a bit of a mess. Anyway, we were promised that it would be perfectly okay, the site would be good, that it would not only take care of the site, but it would take all the pressure off of Crow Stream and all the surrounding areas. We kept saying no, kept saying no, kept saying no. And they said, okay, we'll put some suds in. You won't need them because it's a flood zone 1. It'll be fine. It hasn't been fine. It has flooded. And last November, the Environment Agency
Mrs. Giorgio,
put it into
I think I'm going to have
flood
to
zone
ask
3.
you to.
Sorry.
I think you've covered everything that needs to be said, and I think we're just going
Okay,
over
right.
and over. Are you satisfied, Councillor Davies?
I am. Could I ask one of Councillor Day as well? Councillor Day, R10, could you go into a bit more detail about that, but also could you go into more detail on R5 as well? I've done a little bit on the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. I'm not up to speed fully on those policies. Can you just explain a bit more about those?
Right, I'll deal with R5 first. Basically, that requires that new builds be built to passive house standards or the equivalent, and that an assessment be undertaken to demonstrate the efficiency of the building in terms of heating and the like, and requires that as a precondition for the grant of both outline and full. It's non-compliant straight away because such an assessment hasn't been undertaken. You simply have this bold assertion there will be zero carbon, but not until 2035. And policy R5 is there right now. Policy R10 is effectively the affordable housing mix and so on and so forth, and requires a minimum of 50%. Sorry, you looking... Sorry, it's the other way round. Sorry, I do apologise. Yes. Yeah. In terms of the affordable... It's only numbers, yes. It is, if you like, a gloss on your policy, but it takes it further, particularly with regard to smaller houses, having regard to the particular requirements of Ringwood as opposed to the rest of the New Forest. And it's evidence-based and demonstrates a greater demand for the smaller 1 and 2 bedroom houses and affordable housing in the sense of social housing and the like, rather than necessarily cheap, and underlines that. This new proposal now does not comply with it because of the lower proportion of smaller housing and the much lower proportion of affordable housing.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. Question for any of the councillors who are happy to answer that. We've got a number of conditions, 27, 28, 33, 36, 37 and 49. Can you summarise why you feel that those conditions are not going to be adequate moving forward? These are to do with flooding, so that they're all in the pack of mitigations.
Is this specifically to the flooding mitigation?
This is all to do with flooding and drainage.
Right, well, just for an example, as you've let me in on this, cheers the chairman up, to the west of that site there is a ditch that runs down, which helps to try and avoid the flooding as it is at the moment when it's farmland. New Forest District Council own that ditch, you'll be pleased to know. At our expense, we had to clear it yet again this year in the hope to avoid turning the Elm Tree Pub into the Elm Tree Puddle. That site is incredibly wet. We also had an issue because obviously we own the industrial park the other side of the road. We also had the issue arising from that when the flood zone was changed and had to look at what we were doing over there in order to mitigate the fact that the risk had significantly increased. We are, as a council, exceedingly aware of the problems that have since arisen on this land. I will also, maybe if you remember, that not last winter but the winter before, the A31 was shut on the inside lane because that was a river running down the side of that site and it had taken to freezing, and so for health and safety reasons the Highways Authority had to shut an entire lane of a dual carriageway over the Christmas period so that they didn't have people floating on ice. So that is the volume of water you are seeing coming down that road. And that is adjacent to that site. Since then, they seem to have moved it somewhere. I can only assume that they've moved it sideways back onto the fields, but they didn't tell me that in person. But that is a severely wet site. It is a great concern that the mitigation proposed is inadequate in a great many ways.
I have a follow-up. Can I ask the officer, we've had comments from the EA and on drainage as well. Has the water utility company either engaged or been engaged for their view on the impact of this scheme on the surrounding, particularly along the western side? I couldn't see anything in the report, which is why I asked.
Right, okay, thank you. You'll see on page 69 of your agenda, there's engagement with Wessex Water. That's essentially looking at foul waste disposal. Other than that, that's the only consultation we have undertaken. So the consultations have been with the Environment Agency and the Lead Local Flood Authority in terms of managing the flood risk of surface water on the site.
So just to be absolutely clear, does the EA routinely engage with the utility company as part of their assessment?
Chairman, I can't answer for the EA, I'm afraid.
Councillor Davies.
So this is more to the officers now, officer. In terms of the point raised by Councillor Heron with regard to the slip road, Why is that? Has that condition been put in? Why can't the slip road be done before development starts?
Chairman, this particular point is as it was in March 2023. Obviously, I wasn't with you then, and it sounds maybe Councillor Harron said he'd made this point before, so it may be that it's come up a couple of years ago, but it's dealt with in your report. I'm going to take you to page 94, specifically paragraph 10.9.16, and you'll see that there's narrative there as to why 200 dwellings is the trigger. There's acknowledgement of the delays that could generate whilst you get to the halfway point of the scheme. The county council is of the view, as highway authority, that trigger is acceptable. There are other mitigation measures that are required a lot earlier to compensate for that trigger at 200 dwellings. But the narrative and the reason and the justification to answer your question, I think, is on page 94.
As a follow-up, obviously the members of this committee have changed, so obviously we wouldn't be having perhaps the same opinion as we did in 2023. So is there scope then to revisit this committee?
Your technical advice, the consultation advice from the Highway Authority, those that have looked at the traffic modelling and the delivery of the infrastructure and the phasing of the infrastructure remains unchanged. So you're absolutely right. As a decision maker, there are new members, but those that are giving you your technical consultee advice are satisfied as per page 94.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Councillor Frampton.
Thank you. I have a question of the applicant, if possible. And basically, looking at values and affordable housing, our consultants are quite far adrift on the multiplier used for land values, and obviously the amount, about 10 million adrift, on the cost of putting the road scheme in and exceptional circumstances. Now, what I'd like to work out is you've used a high multiplier. I mean, you've used words in 9 point. We'll find it. 9.4. The applicant sets out, in their view, 9.456. The applicant sets out, in their view, the benchmark land value, the level at which the landowner would typically be prepared to sell the land is around. Now, that if you're using hard and fast figures to argue down policy HOU 2, you're basing a guesstimate, I would assume, or are you basing a guesstimate? Have you actually got a land value agreed? I don't care what it is, but have you actually got a land value agreed for potential purchase or not?
Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Pottage from Taylor Wimpey. We have not purchased the land yet from the landowner.
So that base is a guess.
That's not a guess. That is based on other land values in the area and advice given by our valuer on what would be a reasonable amount that a landowner would be accepting to sell their land willingly.
So would you agree that if conditions were more onerous and it was more expensive to build, then typically under market forces, the land value would automatically drop?
Yes, the land value will be influenced by the amount of infrastructure that the site needs to deliver, another Section 106 and SIL costs, and that is all set out in our viability we submitted to the council.
Yeah, so just putting the point forward again, if it was more onerous and we said, no, you've got to have more social housing, you would then have to go back to the landowner and said, look, figures don't stack, paying you 12.9 because it won't work, and no other developer would do it. So your land value is not worth that. That's market forces, isn't it?
No, that's not correct. The landowner would only be willing to sell at a certain value, and that would be based on other benchmark land values as well, which they themselves would be aware of. Therefore, if we drop the value too much, they would not be willing to sell the land. Hence the viability appraisal we submitted.
So how come our experts are 2 million adrift with you?
Because the land value is often a range. We know what the conditions are in Ringwood. The market is a very strong market in Ringwood. And therefore, that's the differences come from them just considering they think that it'd be slightly lower. However, we have got robust evidence to demonstrate that our benchmark land value is the right value.
So when did you last build or buy significant tracts of land in Ringwood?
We haven't recently, but we are comparing to the transactions that have happened in Ringwood and the surrounding area as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Davis, it's not on the same subject, I hope. Can you just sort of move on to something different?
Well, no, not really, because it's quite an important issue. I would just like to come back on something Councillor Frampton's asked you about, which is about the land value. You are saying that effectively your position is you know best. The council has independent consultants who've come in and said, and it's a considerable difference to your estimate. When, why do you think the council's assessors have come to such a big difference to your own estimate?
Sorry, are you talking about the whole difference or just the benchmark land value difference?
I mean, you can go on to the others if you want, but I'll talk about the benchmark land value.
So I wouldn't say there's a huge difference between us, but they have gone for the lower end. We have gone for what we consider is a accurate benchmark land value for this area and in particular for Ringwood, based on the transactions that we're aware of, including at Moortown Lane.
So you consider the councils to have an opinion, but you to have the accurate figure?
Yes, that's correct.
Does anybody else have anything to say? We're in debate. We're in debate now. No more questions. Councillor Hawkins.
I'm rather disappointed with this particular development because, one, you've got flood risk. I know you're digging loads of holes to collect the water, but that doesn't really stack up. And the other one is the lack of green energy. All those houses should be driven by green energy. That's what the government wants, and that's what we should be doing. We can't wait and wait and wait until the earth falls out. We just end up brown. It's ridiculous. So I'm a little bit not happy with the actual development. Thank you.
Councillor Davis.
I mean, I'd like to recommend refusal. I think the fact of the matter is we have a policy about affordable housing and we should stick to it. The developer, in my opinion, has failed to justify sufficiently the reason for such. It's not just a small reduction. This is almost half of the affordable housing they said they could deliver. Quite frankly, I think they're taking the mickey. And the National Planning Policy Framework stipulates quite clearly that the assessment of viability is not there to protect a return to the developer. It's there to ensure that schemes are actually viable. If our independent assessor, Bruton Knowles, have said that the scheme is viable with 50% affordable housing, we should stick by what Bruton Knowles have said, regardless of tilted balance, and we should stick by our own policy. So I think we should be rejecting this on the basis of that it's not compliant with affordable housing policy, but I would also argue it's also not compliant, clearly, with policy R5 of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan and policy R10 of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. I would also probably add in, although the wording would be up to council to suggest about the flood risk. I'm not confident that the data being used is up to date. I think I saw something that was 8 years old, in which case I'd probably throw that in there as well, and I'd happily ask for a seconder for that.
Can you respond to that, please, Mark? Hang on.
Chairman, a couple of things. Thank you for letting me come in. A couple of things, I think, from maybe following on from the other part of the debate as well, or the questions, if I can, and picking up on Councillor Davies's last point. I don't think we can say regardless of the tilted balance. The tilted balance is very much engaged, and you have a responsibility as a decision maker to take that into account. You'll be aware, because it's set out in your report, that you need to take your decision in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The tilted balance and then MPPF is one of those material considerations. The tilted balance on page 34 and 35 through to 37 sets out the benefits. It sets out the harm as well, and you need to weigh that. I don't think just because there's some conflicts in some places, you have to weigh everything up and look at the implications for the development and the framework when it's taken as a whole, and also the circumstances of the development plan as a whole. And you need to weigh those up. So I think it's really important you have that in your mind when you're taking this consideration and potentially the motion further forward. Couple of other points. In terms of throwing in flood risk, I think we'll throw that in was your use of phrase. I've mentioned through my answer to questions in the presentation, you've got no technical support from your expert consultancies on that. The Environment Agency, the Lead Flood Authority are both raising their objection, similar to as they were in March 2023. And in the report, if I can, on pages 14 and 15, there's an update with regards to the implications for flood events recently that the Town Council have identified with us and how that is consistent with the outputs of the flood modelling and the strategic flood risk assessment. Over the page onto page 15, there's narrative with regards to the age of the flood model and how the Environment Agency, again, the technical advisors giving us advice on flood risk, don't believe that there's a need to update that model, and their position remains unchanged. So I would err caution about using that as part of the reason for refusal if you were to find a seconder. In terms of policy R5, the report quite clearly acknowledges there's a conflict there. We can't hide away from that. There is definitely a conflict. What you have to do, going back to development plan as a whole, framework as a whole, you've got to weigh up whether that harm is significant enough to weigh against the scheme and whether that's a really strong identifiable harm. Bear in mind that, and there's narrative in the report, we're in a housing crisis with our housing allowance supply. You'll get a scheme that's potentially up to 400 homes, 130 more than was the minimum in the scheme, which will contribute significantly to the housing delivery of the site. R10, whilst I've got the floor, if I can, Chairman, because I think that was a question not necessarily in your motion, but it's been considered, and your question to Councillor Day of the Town Council. I'm going to use the report again on this one in terms of trying to help answer the question with regards to R10. Specifically, I'm going to go to page 29. Page 29 sets out an assessment of the application against policy R10 of the neighbourhood plan. And then going over a couple of pages to page 33, there's a whole section on addressing climate change. And specifically at 6.10.9 on page 33, the report notes that at the moment, you're only looking at an application for a scheme with access before you. And I am mindful of Councillor Day's point about the application of policy R10 applies to outline applications as well, but you've got no detailed building designs at the moment against which you can realistically test R10. And what we've done in agreement with the applicant in a similar way to Moortown Lane at the back end of last year is we have a planning condition recommended, and that is condition number 22 on page 46, which requires the submission of sustainable details heat spacing requirements, and other environmentally friendly and beneficial parts of the development fabric that will be delivered with each phase. So that can be secured by condition 22. So I'll pause there if I can, Chairman, but I think it's really important that when you're considering this, and now you're in debate, is you have to think about weighing all those matters, and where you might have some small conflicts, we acknowledge that, the report acknowledges that, but you've got to look at everything in the whole, the framework as a whole, your development plan as a whole, and come to a view applying that balance.
Thank you. So we do have a proposal for a refusal. We are still in debate. Is anybody going to second that? No, so that's off the table. Oh, you want to second the refusal?
May I speak as well, please?
Yes?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. We've added 130 houses to this development from the minimum of 270, which is in our local plan. The viability study that has been put forward to us is at odds in 2 or 3 significant areas with our own experts that we have employed. We haven't thrown this to our office and said, what do you think? We've employed 2 separate firms, one specifically on building control and one on the broader issues. In giving this extra 130, we have actually not even hit... Oh, that should have been turned off, excuse me. You've done it again, that's not a councillor. Excuse me, Madam Chairman. It's going to go out the window. Only 41% of the original 270 that we said was a minimum. So it's even gone below our minimum amount. So it's against R5. It completely ignores the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan, which is a very modern and up-to-date assessment. And that actually went to a referendum. So that is the will of the people of Ringwood. We have got to build, yes, we've got to hit our numbers, I know we have, but it's got to work for the area. It's got to work for the people in that area. It's been identified, the type of housing we need. And this has dropped, as I say, to below 50% of our minimum amount anyway of the 270. And so it on balance, it is against so many policies, HOU2, R6, R5, that it just doesn't stack as it is.
Thank you. We'll continue with the debate. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I first thank the officer for such a comprehensive report? It was an hour and it was well presented. On the first plan that we passed in 2023, Richard Natt did the design on that and it was so thorough, there wasn't a stone left unturned. I've read through the latest information and basically we've got a situation where we've got our officers working probably on a daily basis with the applicants to resolve the queries as they're getting them in from Ringwood Council and everybody else regarding flooding and things like that. Now in the presentation I could see there was considerable amount of temperation organised to try and take this drainage away. Regarding the numbers of properties, I don't agree with anything that's been said. It's quite mathematically clear to me that on 6, 12, 17 and page 36, that when you look at the mass, we are actually gaining on the 50% of houses that we would have got in the first place. There's more houses there, so we're actually gaining on 1 and 2 bedroom. So as my judgment, that's a good thing. Secondly, I want to caution everyone, this has been going on for some years. We've got lots of lovely green spaces and ANRG on it. Everyone's forgetting what's happening from London. In a minute, we've got to put 1,500 houses. I swear to you, this 30, 35 dwellings per hectare is out the window very soon. And these estates that we've looked at have been very sympathetically checked by our officers as they built it over the last 2 or 3 years. In a minute, that is just going to be straight out the window. And you look at some of the concentrations of the areas that we've got on those original maps that were shown. This is what we're going to be looking forward to in the future. I really caution anyone to refuse this sort of work because it's not going to stay the same for very much longer.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I do have to say that there are bits of this that are troubling, and I think will only be resolved when we get our new local plan. We do have to accept that we have to go with the advice from our technical advisors, even if, you know, deep down we think they are problematic, and we don't always agree with the outcomes, but we have to think in terms of this is the clear advice from the experts we've been given. It is a balancing act, and I'm not entirely happy, but I am mindful of the fact that balancing all of those considerations, this has to go ahead, because the benefits, on balance, appear to be outweighing the harms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Firstly, just to come back on what Councillor Sleep said, no, they're proposing 112 affordable units. If we had the 50% of the 270, that'd be 135. Therefore, we're actually seeing a reduction in affordable housing, regardless of the amount of new dwellings. In my opinion, the harm outweighs the good. The affordable housing is desperately needed across the New Forest, and market rate housing is simply not affordable for the vast majority of people, especially in areas like Ringwood. I was knocking doors during the general election in Ringwood, and the amount of people who were looking for affordable housing because the market rate of housing was too much was astonishing. And they're mostly young people in their 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s. And it's, quite frankly, as councillors, we have a duty to defend the interests of our residents. Social, affordable rent housing is very much needed. If we don't stick to our guns on affordable housing, we will set a precedent whereby developers think that they can say whatever they want at application stage, at the initial application, and then come back to us every time and reduce it down. What's to stop them coming back in when they start building and then try and reduce it down further? We've got to set a line in the sand, and this is it. 50% stays.
Does anybody else have anything to say before we go to a vote? So I will come back to the speakers. Yes, I'll bring Mark back in.
Chairman, thank you. You won't be surprised the question I'm going to ask the proposer and seconder, but I need a reason for refusal, please. You've given me some narrative and you've thrown policies out, but I'm going to need some an actual reason, please.
Give me a second. So fails to deliver the policy compliant level of affordable housing under policy HOU2 of the local plan, and with specific reference to the viability assessment review from Bruton Knowles, saying that the development is viable. I would add in that it fails to comply with Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan policy R5 for at least 50% of all new homes to be small homes. I think this application is 45%, and I think fails to comply with Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan R6 for at least 25% of new affordable homes to be decided as first homes. Those are the three key policy requirements or kind of contradictions within the application.
Yeah, if I can come back, Chairman. I think it's the first time we've really got into R6. There's narrative in your report about R6 and how, whilst we have the adoption of R6, since the adoption of R6, there's been adjustments to the NPPF in that regard. Just find the relevant part of your report. I would err very cautiously, page 20, about the omission of first homes, especially on the back of if you deliver first homes, and the narrative on page 20 goes over to page 21, there's an implication, consequential knock-on for the delivery of affordable rented homes and shared ownership homes. And I think you said a minute ago there's a desperate need for rented homes. So delivery of first homes will have an implication for the outcome of delivery of rented homes. And just to reaffirm with you, Chairman, that desperate need for homes, 112 homes is 112 affordable homes, 400 homes is 400 homes towards your housing requirement. But in terms of the housing, in terms of your reason for refusal, failing to deliver 50% against HOU2, I accept, thank you. Especially with the advice of Britton Knowles saying the development could be viable. Failing to accord with R5 of the neighbourhood plan, I would query whether you want to use R6.
I will defer to my second on that one. If he's willing to go for R6, then I am. But if he's not, then
I don't think we'll do R6. I think it is worth putting in the fact that that we are disputing the viability as well. It doesn't accord with HOU2, but also in their viability, the applicant has used a figure that is not quantifiable. They have not bought the land. They have plucked a figure out that we dispute. And so I would say that the viability for their argument to go against HOU2 it does not hold water.
Chairman, I think I have enough for a reason for refusal. If you could delegate to me to draft the final reason. Ultimately, viability argument and discussion will come out of any appeal if an appeal is made. Can I just suggest for the proposal and second, in addition, if the motion is successful and the application fails, you probably need to include a further reason regarding the lack of a 106, so that we can make sure we mitigate for the loss of the infrastructure, ANRG, transport infrastructure, access, offsite highway works. The package of the 106, the lack of that needs to go in as a reason for refusal.
Right.
yeah, I took that as a given.
I'll come back to the speakers. Mrs. Piper, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the viability issue, I'd like to point out to members that Moortown Road was actually assessed by another company on behalf of the council who came up with very different values to Bruton Knowles. It is opinion, and that is proven by the fact that Moortown Road was given consent only a few months ago with 30% affordable homes without the extraordinary costs of the roundabout and the access and the flood mitigation that was not considered during the local plan allocation. Also, just for explanation, the slip road, the reason it is on the 200th is the way the site will be phased, and that will be phased from the southern access. And also for clarification, the flooding actually takes into account climate change of 40% for extreme flood events that have not actually been witnessed thus far. So those incidents that have happened recently have been taken into account in the modelling. And just finally, on policy R10, there will be air source heat pumps. It's just got missed out of that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stilton and Mrs. Giorgio, you have 1 minute between you.
Very quickly, shouldn't the recommendation read grant outline planning permission? This isn't an application for full planning permission. It says grant. It says grant permission, not outline.
Chairman, page 37, recommendation right at the bottom, it says grant outline planning permission.
Councillor Heron, a minute.
Nothing from me, Madam Chairman. You'll be pleased to hear.
1 minute.
Taylor Wimpey is a huge company. Googled it a couple of minutes ago. Profits to April this year for 2025, 777 million. The order book that they've got, 2.3 billion. For them to suggest that they have to sell 200 houses before they can afford to build that slip road, which is absolutely vital if this goes ahead, is, with respect, nonsensical. There is also a big mystery here. Why is it that after 2 years since the original outline application was granted, we are, to all intents and purposes, no further forward? There's been no explanation as to why no detailed application has gone in. There's been no explanation as to how and why they have failed to secure a land deal here. There are a lot of unanswered questions, but I remain of the view that even on the tilted balance approach, to reduce the amount of affordable housing, the smaller housing is wholly unacceptable, and you should refuse.
Thank you. Sorry. I didn't hear what you said, sorry.
You missed me out.
Well, you had a minute between you, so you
You didn't
decided.
take his full minute.
Did you time that? You did reduce it for both of them to 30 seconds. Okay, I'll come back to you then. Thank you.
Yeah, to go back on the flooding, the data is out of date, which is what the councillor said. By the HEC actually says it's out of date. There have been new springs, it should have actually been relooked at. And I can't, if the flooding has all been taken into consideration and it is all hunky-dory and it is all great, then why can't they give us some financial indemnity against it?
Thank you. Well, members, we'll go to the vote. So there's a proposal on the table by Councillor Davis to refuse, and that's been seconded by Councillor Frampton. It's an electronic vote, so all of those in favour, please vote now. Right. It's my casting vote. Okay. I'm happy to proceed with this. I think we need to get this underway and going, and I'm happy that we'll be discussing many discussions in reserved matters between all parties, councillors, applicant, and certainly town council. So I vote against that refusal. Okay, we'll now go back to the recommended vote, which is to grant. Again, can you all vote, please, electronically for that? Oh, I do need a proposal and seconder, sorry. Yeah, Councillor Sleep proposed and seconded. Councillor Dowd, thank you. We will now vote, thank you. That's 78 for, 11% against and 11% abstained. So that has been granted subject to conditions. Thank you. Members, we'll take a break. If you can be back in the chamber by 11:15. Thank you. Our next application is land at Crow Arch Lane and Crow Lane, Ringwood. Application number 24/10015. We have representation to be read and 2 speakers again from the council. So there were no interests, were they, on this one? Sorry? So this is on page 163 of your agenda. So if we can go ahead with the presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the site to the west of Crow Lane, which is allocated as part of Ring 3 in the Local Plan Part 2. The current application seeks relief of conditions 20 and 21 of the original outline consent. This is a red line plan showing the general location and the houses built on the site. This is a wider plan that also shows land in blue that's owned by Hampshire County Council and the line of the proposed east-west link along here. This is an aerial photograph, again for context, and this is where the east-west link would be. This is the policy allocations, just for context. This was the site was allocated as part of the Local Plan Part 2 under Policy Ring 3. And you can see on the first side of this slide, the shading of the Ring 3 allocations and also the employment allocations at Ring 1 and Ring 2. I'll just point out that the area here is where the east-west link was proposed. Subsequent to that, there has been a further allocation in the Local Plan Part 1 for Policy SS13, which overlaps with the Ring 3 allocation. And this, in particular, this area here, the purple land, is allocated for employment use. This is an illustrative contextual plan. The orange line on this plan shows where would the east-west link under condition 20 and 21 is proposed. This line, the green line, is the area that's referred to as land for dedication that would link the allotment access to Yarrow Lane. The blue arrow is an existing link to the Castleman Trail, which was delivered as part of the central plots on Ring 3, and the purple line is the Castleman Trail. This photograph shows the position of the proposed east-west link along the line of the edge of this field, which is owned by Hampshire County Council. These are photographs of where the link would connect to Crow Arch Lane, and in the report it does refer to a number of issues with that link. Firstly, the land ownership issues and also the lack of visibility for pedestrians and cyclists, which would make it difficult to deliver. This is photographs of the Wellworthy Way east-west link connection point with the arrow. This shows, well, you can't see it that well, but there are level issues here with this land, and also more importantly, multiple third-party ownerships that would make it difficult to achieve. In the report, one of the elements is referred to as land to be dedicated to Hampshire County Council. This is an illustrative plan that's been prepared to show where this land would be. The top part of the slide is Yarrow Lane, and this is the land to the side of the property on Yarrow Lane, linking towards the allotment access. It would also include visibility displays. The darker shaded area is the existing extent of highway ownership. Some photographs to show this land. So this is looking south, so you can see that the vegetation is slightly overgrown here, but where this close boarded fence is, that would be the extent of the land that would be dedicated. This is looking north from the allotment access, again showing the land, and this shows in more detail the allotment access. So the land, if that land was dedicated, it would facilitate the provision of a link along the eastern side of Crow Arch Lane in this position for the onward link to the Castleman Trail. Just for context, this is some existing photographs of the Yarrow Lane link to the Castleman Trail, which this land, dedicated land, would allow the onward link onto. So that's the corner of Yarrow Lane, and then a couple more just showing it linking down to the Castleman Trail and showing the position of that. So that would provide a continuous connection from that allotment access northwards. Again, contextually and referred to in the report, a link northwards was agreed as part of the resolution on the Moortown Lane application. This is a plan showing the details of that, but because of the land ownership issues, this link would not be able to be provided to the same standard. It would be a narrower link between 1.5 and 1.8 metres wide, so it wouldn't be a shared link, and it would have to cross over the road partway along. So it would be a less desirable link to achieve. This is an extract of the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan, Policy R11, Active Travel Policy Map, showing an identified route from Moortown Lane northwards to the Castleman Trail, and indicated here with the arrow is the Crow Arch Lane land for dedication. If the land remained within the applicant's ownership, it would be difficult to achieve this link in the future. As such, and it's obviously set out in much more detail in the report, the recommendation is authorised to grant the relief of the conditions subject to a legal agreement which would secure a contribution to be used either for the provision of the East-West link or other sustainable transport measures to improve or provide connectivity between the site and Ringwood Town Centre. The dedication of the land to the Hampshire County Council along the eastern boundary, as I've identified on the plan, and the construction of that link if it's not provided by others within 5 years of the completion of the legal agreement. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. We have a letter from the agent to be read. Okay, thank you.
This is a statement from Ms. Laura Driver from Vistry Southern. I would like to reiterate that this proposal is not about not delivering the link. It is focused on the challenges of delivering the link in terms of land ownership and the change in planning policy in the latter allocation of this land, and providing a different way to deliver that same objective. Securing the link by way of a commuted sum allows the ability to unlock the link without prejudicing the allocation. It should also be noted that the proposal also goes further than the contribution, with Vistry Southern agreeing to dedicate an area of land to Hampshire County Council to facilitate an additional link. This was not part of the original obligations, but Vistry appreciate the benefit that this other link would secure, and that the Vistry land allows this link to be unlocked. The original project included the cost of delivering this link, as this formed part of the Section 106 obligations. As this was many years ago, the allocated budget sum is significantly less than is now proposed by the commuted sum. In calculating the sum, Vistry has costed the path that could be delivered at current build rates, which are considerably higher in more recent years. Therefore, the sum put forward is the current real-time cost of delivering this link. It has no cost-saving benefit to Vistry. In relation to the question on Vistry profit, this is not a material planning consideration and not a matter of public record. I would reiterate that the cost of delivering the path is reflected in the commuted sum. It is not a matter of reducing the cost to Vistry, but to find a way to overcome the challenges to ensure the objectives of sustainable links are achieved. I would highlight that considerable discussions have taken place with the Council and also with Hampshire County Council, who agree that the proposal before committee is the only way to unlock the issues which otherwise will continue to stop the objective being achieved. I support the recommendation from your officer where a detailed and a considered view has been taken, reflecting on the objectives to promote sustainable links against the challenges of delivery. I hope that members on balance consider this proposal as the way to achieve the objectives.
Thank you. Councillor Heron, 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. What a disaster. You gave a planning consent based on this. You used statistics for transport numbers and movements, traffic movements based on this. And we have failed the people of Ringwood to deliver it. It is a disgrace, in my mind, if this council agrees to the deletion of this. We spend our lives in this chamber talking about the green agenda, supporting it. We pay for officers and special movements. And now we stand there, and when it becomes difficult, we don't. And as a question to the officers, I know that it's nicely put up £57,000 towards mitigation, but that's pointless. Money in the bank is a useless addition to the green agenda and a useless addition to safety of people. I used to cycle that into town from here, and the roads are not fit for it. We've now increased the traffic, increased the number of people. We need to deliver that cycle route, and £57,000 is just a number in a bank and useless. And it isn't even £57,000 in the bank, unless one of the officers could confirm that the £30,000 worth of Section 106 money that we gave to Hampshire County Council to deliver this route is going to be returned.
Councillor Day, 3 minutes.
On Friday of last week, it was my honour to chair Ringwood Town Council's Planning Town Environment Committee, and we were greeted by a delegation of some 30 or 40 Year 2 children from the local school, 5 of whom came in to petition us to do something about cycleways and footpath links. Can I refer you to page 169 of your report papers? And halfway down, there's the list of problems. There's a substantial level difference. Yes, there always has been. We've always known that. There are safety concerns, etc. Yes, we've always known that as well. Visibility, nothing has changed there. And there is also already an easement that Hampshire County Council have granted. My concern is with this last one about Wellworthy Way. I live just down the road from there, and if I choose to cycle into town, I cycle along the cycle path on Christchurch Road and into Wellworthy Way, and then follow the cycle path that goes all the way through Wellworthy Way, out onto New Street, and then across to the Castleman Way, which you can go across and cycle all the way into town safely with just the one crossing point. I don't understand why the ownership of Wellworthy Way is a bar to this, because it isn't a bar to the existing cycleways that are there. I did also prepare a written submission beforehand, which I trust you've all seen. I don't propose to repeat that. I invite you to refuse this application and to instruct your officers to serve breach of condition notices to force these developers to do what they promised many, many years ago and have failed to deliver.
Thank you. Members, questions, please. Councillor Davies.
Sorry, this was definitely before my time. I was just wondering, and it's annoying that the applicant isn't here to answer questions, because I'd like to ask them why why the development was built, or the central part was occupied before this was delivered. Because if it's part of planning condition, why was it allowed at the time? I mean, can officers enlighten me as to the history of this development and why the central block was constructed or commenced and occupied before this was delivered?
Thank you, Chairman. I could provide a bit of background on that. My understanding is that discussions commenced on the scheme to deliver the link at about the time that the permission for the central plots was approved in the summer of 2020, and those discussions were ongoing with Hampshire County Council and particularly their Estates Department. A submission was made to us in November. A formal submission to discharge the condition was made in November of that year, with plans to show a link along that line, but because of safety audit issues and other matters, it couldn't be agreed at that time. So they were actively pursuing that, and it has been it hasn't been a forgotten matter that we just haven't sought compliance with. It has been a discussion that has been ongoing. Obviously, if the applicant was here, they would be able to give you a bit more on that, but hopefully at least that's a little bit helpful.
Yeah, that is, sorry. But wasn't the condition, or maybe I'm reading it wrong, wasn't the condition that they couldn't build them or occupy them, sorry, until that was met, until that was done? In which case, why didn't we enforce that condition?
The only comment I'd make on that was because the discussion was ongoing, the condition wasn't enforced at that time. Usually the usual protocol is if something is being discussed, the submission had been made, we wouldn't normally serve a notice at that point. But I take the point you're making. Thank you.
More questions? Councillor Richards.
I'm confused about this. I mean, if the developer's not going to build the link, who is going to build it? And when's it going to happen? And which route is it going to take?
The actual link does go across the Hampshire County Council land in this area here that is subject to the allocation in. Sorry, I'm just trying to get the mouse in the right place. Along here, this is the land that's owned by Hampshire County Council, has an allocation for employment use, and they are looking at schemes to develop that. As to the timescale of that, that's uncertain. They have granted 3-metre easement across their land, but because their land is going to come forward, whilst the link could be provided across part of it on that 3-metre route, the scheme they come forward with may be prejudiced or the route may have to change. So that is one of the reasons why the link is not deliverable in the reasonable or certain timescale that's referred to in the report. So the 50,000 contribution could be used to facilitate the provision of that link or for other sustainable connectivity measures in Ringwood. But at this point, it's not certain what the route would be or when it could be delivered because of the issues outlined in the report.
Councillor Sleep.
Yes, so basically what we're saying on page 166, as I understand it, the route hasn't been agreed and it should have been put in, but it hasn't been done because it was subject to debate. But it seems to me like the reason for debate was the fact that Hampshire County Council have got land which eventually will be released, and you can't use that as a judgment in this situation. I mean, it seems logical that eventually that's going to come through and the routes will be installed, but at the moment you can't use that as a judgment. Is that how I see it?
Yes, that's correct. In addition to that, there's the visibility issues and the land that's required to provide visibility on Crow Arch Lane. I understand aren't within Hampshire County Council's ownership, so there would need to be a rerouting of that to get the appropriate visibility and the multiple third-party rights for Wellworthy Way. So there's sort of three parts of an equation in that sense.
Yeah.
So basically, when we look at these cycleways and things, all our parish councils, all our district councils, the Hampshire County Council are all on board to try and get cycleways fitted and walkways fitted around these estates and these areas. So basically what we're relying on is that all of these councils will work with one another to eventually give us a system that will work for the Ringwood residents. I mean, they're not going to leave it with a big window in the middle of an estate somewhere, are they? It just doesn't make sense.
And obviously, if the land is dedicated to Hampshire Highways, then it makes it facilitates that delivery. And without that dedication of land, which at the moment is within the applicant's ownership, it becomes difficult to even provide a connection from Yarrow Lane southwards to then connect onto the East-West link. So that is a sort of an unlocking land that would enable that to happen.
Councillor Davies.
Yeah, so can I ask a question of Councillor Heron, as I think this was referred to because he objected. The recommendation that's been put forward, why do you think that doesn't go far enough?
Well, there's a number of issues. First of all, money isn't any good if you don't know what your revised scheme is. So I think this would be far more pertinent if someone had looked at a revised scheme, costed it, and come back and said, look, we cannot deliver the original scheme, but we have an alternative, and this is the amount of money that we need to deliver it. Because money in the bank doesn't get a single person safely along a road. It's pointless. And at the moment, what they're saying to me is that we can't achieve what we promised when this development was put in, so we're just going to give you some money. But they're not even giving you the amount of money that they're telling you. They're saying that they're going to give you £57,000, but Hampshire County Council, when we were doing this scheme, were paid £30,000 of our Section 106 money to help deliver the feasibility. So actually, if you look at our bank account, we're only going to be up £27,000 on the whole scheme, which, as anyone will know, doesn't deliver diddly in cycling provision. So my question is, before we delete this, whilst we're in the discussions with Hampshire County Council, first of all, we need to have a conversation with them that confirms that they are returning the £30,000 that we paid to them. That's section one. And number two, we should be looking at what we can devise to deliver an alternative to this route if it is truly undeliverable. And then when we know the cost of that, that is what should fall on the developer. Because the developer was the person who got the planning consent, who got the return on that development, who failed to deliver on the planning condition that we failed to enforce on. And everyone has failed Ringwood, and they shouldn't continue until they have found a solution. And this is just a very simple, we send you a bit of money, you delete the condition, and I promise you that in the next 5 years, there won't be a single discussion on it anywhere. And that's not the way forward. Maybe we do need to delete this condition, but only when we found a solution, not delete it first, find a solution, hopefully some willy-nilly point in the future.
Can we have a response? Can we have a response? Do either of you need to
Can I
respond to that?
respond?
Chairman, maybe I can help, or I'll try and help. In terms of where we're at, you've seen on page 169, I think Councillor Day took you to it when he did his deputation. The history of delivery of the East West Link is set out, as are the barriers. And quite simply, the route that's proposed cannot, on reflection, be delivered, it says there on page 169. It would end in a dead-end route. So even if we sought to deliver it at the moment, it seems to be a route to nowhere. What this proposal is doing is not just seeking relief of the condition in terms of taking the problem away, they're looking at the dedication of land to try and facilitate an alternative link into the Castleman Trail, the east-west, another east-west link, which would be compliant, as Judith showed on her presentation, with R10 in terms of trying to provide some north-south connectivity, and a contribution of £57,000, which I understand has been calculated based on the current county council costs and fees for delivery of a footpath at this standard. So it's the current cost estimate for delivery of the path as per the condition. I'm not sure how it sits with the previous £30,000 that the county have taken, but this is a standalone £57,000 that's been estimated at the cost of delivery of this path, which would be a dead-end route and isn't deliverable. So you get two things as a result of relief of the condition. You get the dedication of land and the delivery of the north-south link at Yarrow Lane up towards the Castleman Trail, which helps comply with the green infrastructure strategy in R11. And you get a sum of money which we can negotiate the obligation to hopefully be broad enough whereby, in terms of Councillor Heron's point, we can come up with, negotiate, talk to the town council and find a strategy on which we can spend that to make sure we get better connectivity to the town.
Councillor Dowd.
Yes, thank you. It is quite confusing trying to balance the what we're actually what the benefit is from keeping that very loose at this stage. I understand the ones that can be deliverable, and I think we can make a determination on that. But there is so much that is so vague about what's being proposed for that disputed bit. It does seem to me that I don't see how we can come to a rational decision on the benefit of that, rather than deferring it and coming back to that when the route has actually been worked out. It's a shame we couldn't have looked at this in two parcels, the bits that have been determined and leave out the bit where there is clearly still no discernible route at this stage. So that's my concern. Is the proposal that the package with those already agreed routes enough of a benefit without that one? Because there is some, I think, concern that that's actually never going to happen. It's just going to get kicked down the path for a long time.
The application that's before us needs to be determined in a reasonable timescale, and as in the report, the likely timescale for the delivery of the link in association with the Hampshire County Council development is uncertain, and that's the reason why the alternatives have been looked at. The money that would be contributed would then be used to facilitate that link at the appropriate time. So I hear what you say about that we don't have a clear package. If the alternative had been able to be agreed, we probably wouldn't be here looking at relieving the condition. So this is what we brought to you as a recommendation on the basis of the information we have now and what we expect to be happening certainly in the short term and probably medium term timescale.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. So, going back to Councillor Heron again, Councillor Heron, do you think a deferral would make sense in this scheme to allow time to sort out the routing issues, or would you prefer a refusal or support? What's the, because in my mind, I'm edging towards a deferral on the basis that there's a lot of unanswered information here, and I don't think not having the applicant here doesn't help.
There's been a figure put about that said that it's calculated, but it's calculated on an assumption that a route that doesn't exist, of no known length, of no known difficulty, of no known easements, is being delivered. It is a meaningless sum when you don't actually can't apply it to a scheme. If you said, I can put in this footpath and this is what it's going to cost, you can attribute a sum to it. When you say, I think I can put in a footpath that I don't quite know where it goes, over whose land and what easements I've got to pay, the sum is entirely meaningless. What we need is an alternative scheme that someone can bring forward that says that this delivers the results that we were looking for. Then you can calculate a cost. Then you can say to the developer, you failed to complete on your application, something we haven't enforced against, but let's worry about that. We don't always enforce against people who breach conditions. We just ignore them and take an envelope. But we have found a solution, and this is now what it's going to cost you. And the really bad news is that the last one was going to cost you £57,000, but the new one's going to cost you £100,000. And tough luck, because you failed to deliver on the condition, and we will enforce against you. That's what we need. So yes, if someone's going to design a scheme, and I'll bet you that the designing of the scheme is going to cost more than £30,000, with before we put a single piece of gravel on the road. When we've had a new scheme, then if we're going to do that, then fine, defer it, and let's go and find a new scheme, and then we can come back and determine it.
On that response, and sorry, on the flip side, obviously, I think number 2 in the mitigation is about dedicating land as highway. Why can't we just say to the developer, that's where you put your thing and you design the scheme and you do it? I don't know why we're basically, the developer's saying, we'll give some land to highway, because then we're not actually getting a guarantee of what's going to go in.
The scheme that has been agreed as part of the Moortown Lane application, or would be within the legal agreement, would be required to be delivered before occupation of phase 1. And it's anticipated that will be in the relatively short term timescale. The fallback position, as set out, is that if that's not delivered in its full entirety within 5 years, then this particular applicant would then deliver that link, if that assists. In terms of the other points that were raised, the 57,000 contribution is based on a link that would join Crow Arch Lane slightly further south and would then dogleg round into the site to link up with future access that would come from the Moortown Lane element, and obviously be determined by what happens on the employment part of the site. So it's not something that's going to be resolved in a very short future. I don't have, I can show you, I have got one here, but I haven't on the slide. So this...
Sorry, Councillor Hawkins, it was just to say, do they have an image or a map?
If you can just see where my arrow is, so the line would go along here up to that edge and then to about this point, and then the link would come up from the other development through to link onto Wellworthy Way.
So again,
sorry for that omission, I should have included that.
I just want to make sure that whatever we do, I'm clear on what we're doing. So why can't we just wait until the other development does their path, and then, because otherwise it's very difficult for us to judge, isn't it? I'm sorry, I'm failing to understand why this can't just be done.
I think it's the timescales we're looking at and the uncertainty around the timescales, and the fact we've got the application in front of us that we need to determine.
Are there any more questions? Councillor Hawkins.
you say the pathway can't be done at the present time. Can we see if you dismiss it here, it's not liable to go in when the land's ready, when the houses are built, and we really don't want to dismiss the park walking routes and cycle routes. So can't we make sure there is a guarantee that it will be included when the time is right?
Part of the recommendation is that these 57,000 would be used for the east-west link, and it's made clear in the report that this is the clear preference for the delivery of that connectivity between the site and the town centre and the facilities at the Wellworthy Way end. But in the event that that can't be delivered, it could be used for alternative provision for connectivity, but the terms of the legal agreement would specifically say the east-west link or this alternative. So it's not going to be just forgotten about in that sense. And there are other requirements in the allocations for SS16 for a link through the site, Moortown Lane site, up through the employment land to Wellworthy Way. So this link ultimately would connect to that. But it's uncertain. I'm sorry, it's a difficult one to explain.
Right, questions. Are we asking any new questions? Councillor Davies.
I just seem to be getting more and more questions in my head the more this goes on. So to confirm, you're saying that it could still go ahead, but by removing the conditions, we then effectively mean it might not happen, which is why we have objections from Councillor Heron and Councillor Day. I'm just confirming that because it feels very, very confusing at the moment.
I've now not only suffered a delay for 4 years, I'm now suffering a delay for a possible further 5 years. I could be dead before the cycle link is put in.
So we're basically saying it could be another 5-year delay. That's what we're saying.
It is a clear objective to deliver the link. By relieving the condition, we wouldn't be taking away that objective, and that would be tied into the legal agreement. What the report is setting out is the uncertainty and the timescales. It's not only uncertain in terms of when the development, even if the development had an approval, it could be developed at any time within 3 years of that approval. We don't even have a scheme on that site yet. So it's a very long timescale. A path that could be put in wouldn't meet appropriate visibility or safety standards and wouldn't actually link because of the third party rights that exist on Wellworthy Way, which with CPOs and other things you could probably resolve that, but that is another element that's a barrier to provision.
Okay.
I think we've had all the questions we need around this. We're going to debate. Does anybody else have? Councillor Davies.
Well, if we're going into debate, if we remove this, surely that's not in compliance with CCC2 of the local plan. So surely it should be rejected on that basis. Because our local plan actively encourages, say, sustainable travel. I'm just saying that's my debate. If we're going into time restraints, bear in mind, apparently it's still a condition and still a desire to have a bridge over the river in Lymington from Ampress, and that was 20 odd years ago. So I worry about constantly allowing more and more time for things. I think we should reject the removal of these two conditions, and my justification would be that we are it's about active travel and CCC2.
I'm not quite sure what you were saying there. What were you saying? You wanted to refuse it? What were you actually saying?
I'll repeat myself. A refusal of to remove the conditions, because to do so would be contrary to local plan policy CCC2, I think it's 1, 2 and 4 subsections of that.
Okay. Councillor Sleep, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, can I just say that once again, we're in a circumstance where it's steps, a process of steps. And the Hampshire County Council, all the district councils are all going to be under pressure to build. It won't be very long before the Hampshire County Council link looks as if it's going to go. It'll be on the board very soon. And it's logical that the same pressure are put under us with cycleways. They're going to join the links up. It's just, at the moment, we might be peeved that they're not going to do their job at the moment, but everyone knows that the next link will be following on very shortly. So we're discussing something that's got to be done in this window, but in a few months' time, the next part of the plan will be resolved and we'll be back to square one. We'll get the cycle links in. I can understand the council being upset about it because it hasn't been they got away with not doing it. But it'll come in. It's logic. They're all going to join them up. We've got to. We're looking everywhere to put cycleways in all our towns and villages.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any comments to make? I will come back to you in a minute, but you do need a seconder. Does anybody else have anything to say? No. In that case, is anybody going to second Councillor Davies? No. So that's off the table. What else did you need to say?
I was just going to say, on Councillor Sleep's point, obviously with local government reorganisation, it's likely that the land and assets of Hampshire County Council will come to this district council.
Can we not speculate about what might happen?
Well,
Okay,
to be fair, this is pretty speculative.
Well, we don't know.
Well, that's the whole point.
Is we don't know.
That is the whole point. But if you're going to speculate about what's going to happen in the future, you can also speculate that this district council will end up with that land and we can then make sure that it's enforced.
It's talking about to be quite honest.
We can't really comment on that.
I think we've come to the end of the debate. I think there's nothing else that can be said about this. We'll come back. Oh, sorry, Councillor Rickman.
Yeah, I would like to propose the recommendation. This is part of the process, as Councillor Sleeper says. You just got to work through it as you go along, and I can't see going back on it now. We should proceed.
Thank you. And a seconder, please. Councillor Sleep, thank you. I'll come back to the speakers, then you have 1 minute each. Councillor Heron.
Thank you very much. Under local government reorganisation, in under 2 years, both the land holding and the condition would, if we maintain them, be under the same control of the same authority, and we can push it through. So why don't we hold on to this condition until such a time as we can deliver it? It's only 2 years. What you're doing is deleting that condition way too soon, way ahead of it. That land holding and the condition will be under the control of the same authority if you just hold the condition.
Councillor Day?
And not only that, but this land is already subject to an easement, so there is a legal right of way to go over it. In terms of employment, land, Hampshire County Council, the only vehicular access is onto Wellworthy Way. So if they can't sort that out in terms of their vehicles, this is never going to get built because there's no other way to get to this site. If you can get lorries in there, you can get bicycles out.
Thank you. Members will go to the vote. So the recommendation is to grant to the service manager. It has been proposed by Councillor Rickman and seconded by Councillor Sleep. All of those in favour, please vote. Have we got them on? Okay, right. So we have 5 for, 3 against and 1 abstention. So that's been granted. Thank you. We'll move on now to our third application, the Boatyard, Endeavour Way, Hyde Marina Village. Oh, sorry, Malcolm? think Councillor Dowd also raised his hands on that one, didn't you? Okay, fine. Right, where are we? So that's application 24/10522. And we have Mr. Ian Johnson, the agent, thank you. Mr. Alistair Stubbs, okay, thank you. Mr. Russell Dyer, who's an objector, will have a representation to be read. And Councillor Alex Wade will also have a representation to be read. So we'll go forward then, please, with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So just as a quick update, since the report was published, we have had a few additional representations, some of which are those referenced to be read out, but just for context, there was 4 in total, and they primarily reiterated concerns about amenity, traffic, conflict with the previous appeal decision, and concerns about the changes to the commercial use elements of the site. So to just then go into the site in a bit more detail, the site that we're talking about here is immediately adjacent to the Hythe Marina. You can see there, the Hythe Marina itself has both berthing for boats and residential properties, as well as a scattering of commercial units, but further away from the application site, with the application site forming a sort of a little more industrial commercial enclave to the northern edge. Just to give you a bit of an idea of the relationship there with the sort of nearest commercial properties, we've got a sort of storage area for boats and then a number of buildings. Just while we're on this plan, I'll talk a bit about the sort of history of the site and how we've got to where we are. So the site has traditionally operated as a boatyard for the servicing and repair of boats. There was a condition restricting the site to the servicing and repair of boats normally berthed at the Hythe Marina itself. Back in 2009, we had a planning application which was refused by the planning committee. That application was to amend the condition to allow work on boats not based at Hythe Marina. The application was refused relating to concerns regarding sort of comings and goings of boats and associated disruption that would cause. And that decision was appealed, and the appeal was partially allowed. So the condition was varied to allow the servicing of boats which were delivered to the marina by sea, specifically only, and not by road. So, for example, there was concern that the delivery of vehicles, sites to the boats to the site by vehicle, by road, would prove disruptive to the amenity of local residents, particularly citing concerns about sort of balconies and amenity spaces fronting Endeavour Way, which is this road here. Subsequent to that, the site then continued to operate for a number of years. At the current time, there are a number of unauthorised uses on the site. So these buildings, some of them have been converted to uses outside of the use as for boat servicing and repair. So as outlined in the report, there's a variety of different uses currently operating from the site. They're primarily marine related, but sort of covering different uses, uses associated with primarily in some fashion the equipment on boats or a commercial divers company, etc. So that leaves us in a situation where the applicant has come forward with the current application. Just for a bit of context, when I'm talking about the operation of those uses, the report refers to units 3 and 4, which is these 2 buildings here, which are the smaller pair, and then units 1 and 2, which is these 2 larger buildings here. The applicant has come in with the current application, again seeking to amend the conditions, or the singular condition imposed on the site. They are seeking, they have proposed a condition which would restrict the site to marine-related uses, and they've also recommended or suggested a condition which suggests a restriction on the entry to the wider Hythe Marina site of larger vehicles to certain hours of use to try and control the sort of wider impacts of the development. We don't think that we can impose a condition on the entire Hythe Marina associated solely with this development. There are obviously, as noted, a whole array of other uses within the marina. We don't think it would be reasonable or appropriate to impose a condition on the entry of vehicles to the marina as a whole associated solely with this development. So we don't think that second condition proposed by the applicant is reasonable in this case. As discussed in the report, we think the proposed condition proposed by the applicant for marine uses is perhaps a bit too vague and imprecise in its language. We've obviously, the current uses on the site we consider to fall within the current Class E use, but as discussed in the report, that's quite a wide use class. There are a number of different uses with different associated impacts. Class E includes, for example, retail units, restaurants, and we don't think those would necessarily be appropriate in the existing context of the site. There's sort of two key tranches to the proposed amended condition by the applicant relating to the use itself, and then the relaxation or removal of the control to delivery of boats to the site by road. So we've sort of tried to tackle those two issues individually. In terms of, we think there is an ability to control the conditions and change of use of the site in an acceptable fashion. We've recommended a condition to control the use to the existing boat repair use, which is obviously the existing functionality and lawful use of the site, but also to allow a wider scope of uses falling within a specific subset of Class E, which is sort of office or light industrial style uses, which are generally considered to be acceptable within a residential environment, which the wider site obviously does have some context, although it is set back from those nearest residential properties, as you can see here. So we consider a condition in that regard would be reasonable and would allow the continued operation of the site. The application obviously has been supported by a transport statement. There has been a lot of concern about the implications of the development in terms of the sort of highways access. The transport statement talks widely in terms of the change of use about a transition. There will potentially be more vehicles associated with the site, comings and goings, but a transition away from sort of larger goods vehicles visiting the site, which we don't consider to be inappropriate in this context and location. Separately from that use, there is obviously a lot of concern about the potential change in the condition to allow the transportation of vehicles to the site by road. The access route is a sort of private access way within the marina off the main highway, which is sort of ceases when you enter the Hythe Marina site. We have consulted with both our environmental health team and the Highways Hampshire County Council team. They haven't raised, in terms of, sort of highway safety, we haven't got any objections. Obviously, vehicles, when they enter the site, will need to be moving, enter the marina, and obviously the site itself will need to be moving quite slowly because of the shape and layout of the roads. We have consulted with our environmental health team about the potential amenity impacts associated with the development, because obviously that was an issue of substantial concern with the previous appeal decision. We've discussed what restrictions we could put in place, how we would control the development. I think the fundamental issue is where we have sort of slow-moving vehicles on an existing road. We don't necessarily think that there is an intrinsic amenity harm to a residential occupier. That's not an unusual relationship for a residential occupier to have when they're positioned next to a road. But we have sort of in our discussions with the environmental health team, recommended a condition to control the hours of delivery by boats to avoid the more sensitive hours where residents have a right to expect the sort of quiet enjoyment of their properties. We think that strikes a reasonable balance between ensuring that those residential amenities of the private residents are respected, while still allowing the continued commercial operation of the site in a sort of reusable fashion. Just to give you a bit of context on the sort of development itself, you can see here, this is the entrance to the site, those nearest residential properties here, and this is the access route coming up. This is looking into the site at those the larger units, and then this is looking at the smaller units there. And this is just to give a bit of context of the existing boat storage that goes on the site and the area of cars standing here, and the sort of smaller units here and the larger units there. We've tried to weigh up and balance the sort of the site history in coming to this decision, and that's why we've recommended the suite of 2 conditions to control the development. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, and go into more detail if needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Johnson, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. My name's Ian Johnson. I'm the Managing Director of Luke and Beck, and I'm here this afternoon as the agent and talking on behalf of our client and the applicant, Marina Developments Limited. Firstly, just like to thank your officers for their assistance and advice throughout the application process and preparing a comprehensive and balanced report. So this application has been brought about principally by the inability to let the units over a sustained period of time on this commercial site, owing to the restriction of imposed Condition 2 of the Planning Permission, which was granted in 2009, that severely limits local marine-related businesses being able to occupy these 4 units. So since submission, we've worked closely with your officers and consultees to address any concerns. As a consequence, there are no technical or environmental objections from them, and there is support on policy grounds. So the proposed variation of the condition seeks what we feel is a sensible balance between being able to successfully let these units and deliver their related economic benefits, and ensuring the reasonable amenities of near residents are safeguarded. We understand the concerns of the Hythe Marina Association and welcome their recognition of the need for the units to be occupied, but we consider your officer has carefully reviewed this matter and has the right balance. Now, in the light of no objections from your Environmental Health Officer or the Highways Authority, officers have recommended approval, but subject to a new planning condition that limits occupation of the units to marine businesses, only which fall within Class EG, so offices, research development, light industrial, which tend to be, they're the type of uses that can be carried out in a residential area. And a little bit of context, the site is currently allowed for B2, general industrial use. So we're moving away from that as a benefit, I believe. The wording of this condition will be safeguarding the amenities of the residents in accordance with policy ENV3, and also support marine-related businesses and the local employment opportunities that will bring in accordance with your policies DM 11, 22 and 24. So in addition, it's proposed to limit traffic movements to normal working hours as well, and no time on Sundays or bank holidays, which again will safeguard local amenities. At the moment, there is no such restriction. So both of these conditions are considered to meet paragraph 57 of the MPPF. So, as I'm sure you're aware, conditions that are necessary, enforceable, precise, reasonable in all other respects. So your officers' conclusions at paragraph 12, I think, quite nicely summarise these matters very well. And in the light of this, I respectfully ask the planning condition to
Thank you very much. You have gone over your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, Mr. Stubbs, you will have 1.5 minutes as you're sharing it with a letter that we've had of representation. So if you'd like to go ahead, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, the Hythe Marina Residents Association wish the applicant to be commercially successful, but not at the expense of residents' amenity that is impacted by the transportation of large boats through unsaltable streets, as has already been previously determined. This is our sole concern about this application. We have attempted to speak with the applicant multiple times on this matter. In the only brief minuted discussion in July 24, the applicant's managing director assured us that they had no intention of letting buildings to a boat builder or similar due to the access limitations. To further this matter, we proactively proposed a set of conditions on the 10th of May for discussion. Regrettably, this has not been progressed by the applicant in sufficient time, and residents feel that our goodwill has been used against us. We believe the conditions that we proposed with the addition of EG3 by us meet the applicant's needs and protect residents' amenity long term. They align with the previous decision of the Inspectorate and assurances from the applicant. In not supporting the proposed condition on boat transportation, the applicant is actually walking back those assurances from their management. There is an undeclared interest here as well. The NFDC is a financial beneficiary of this decision. From the applicant's managing director in that same meeting, NFDC want to see this being let properly, as they get some rent. Can the chairman assure us that appropriate conflict of interest procedures have been adopted? Finally, the recommendation appears to be influenced by the transportation data in the email dated the 2nd of April.
Excuse me, I've got to move you on. You have had your time. Thank you. And we have a letter to be read out. Thank you.
Point 1. Hythe Marina Village is an inappropriate area for any form of industrialisation. It is a leisure and residential area, established as such more than 40 years ago. It attracts leisure activities and its associated spending and is visited by local people for various celebrations, for example D-Day, as a viewing point. Both revenues and use by local people will be reduced if industrialised. Point 2. This application has been made multiple times in the past and failed. The last was a year ago, and before that, in August 2023, which was withdrawn when objections were raised. As there have been no material changes since those previous change of use applications, it should not be accepted, nor time wasted on the same subject. Point 3. Access, namely Jones Lane, West Street and Endeavour Way, were not designed for heavy vehicles, particularly low loaders with multiple axles up to 40 tonnes, and their associated manoeuvres. Access to the site for large articulated lorries with heavy large loads is challenging, with several 90-degree tight turns where trailer tyre scrubbing will damage the road surface, wearing it at a rate it was not designed for. The 3 local streets mentioned are used by pedestrians of all ages. Point 4. The road bridge into the marina collapsed 2 years ago when a sinkhole appeared, partly caused by the lack of maintenance inspections by the landlord, MDL and his agents.
Thank you. We'll need to stop there. Thank you. And you have a letter from Councillor Alex Wade. Thank you.
I am objecting for the following reasons. The routes used to access Hythe Marina by large heavy goods vehicles are ill-suited for this type of transportation of large boats. The roads are narrow, with tight corners and roundabouts, cars parked on the road, and existing issues over traffic and highway safety. Jones Lane has a tight roundabout and small railway bridge which will be difficult for navigation by large vehicles. This is also a well-used route for pedestrians and cyclists to access the village centre and many unofficial crossing points along here. West Street is just as narrow with very tight bends with little road space for wide loads, and there could be highway issues if there are cars parked along Jones Lane, reducing access. Many older, vulnerable residents and young families live and visit here, and road safety is an existing concern. Large HGVs navigating these small roads with bends with little visibility is a concern. There is a genuine risk of a serious accident along these routes, which are not built for such large vehicles. An increase in HGV road movements will have a detrimental impact on the marina residents' quality of life in their homes, with additional noise, traffic, and obstructions on the highway. The marina is adjacent to Dibden Bay, which is designated as a SSSI, and any increase in HGV movements and increased noise and emissions will have a negative impact on the site. There has been a significant issue of subsidence at the entrance to the marina in May 2023. This led to the road collapsing for residents to access their homes, and the addition of regular heavy goods vehicles using this route could lead to this happening again, as this was a major impact on marina residents and suggests there are serious weaknesses in the road structure and it is unsuitable for HGVs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now have questions, please. Councillor Sleep.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's just a query on this road use. We're talking about lots of concerns with people that frankly aren't qualified to make an opinion, but justified in saying that they've seen it and they're worried about the size of transport. But we're looking here now at Hampshire County Council Highways and Hampshire County Council Rights of Ways, both saying there's no objections to this. So even though people talk about heavy vehicles and the turning circles and all the rest of it, the people that are actually responsible for this have looked at it and said there's no issue. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, so in terms of obviously regular access, the site can currently be, there's no restriction on the site being accessed by HGV vehicles. There is a restriction on the delivery of boats to the site, but there's no wider restriction on the delivery of HGV vehicles. Lorries can visit the site, and you would expect them to, for a larger commercial use, industrial use, to have those sorts of comings and goings associated with it. And indeed, the traffic report did report some HGV vehicle movements on the existing sort of functionality of the site. In terms of we have explored with the Highways Authority whether there are sort of special restrictions that would be required in terms of the vehicle movements of boats. Their response was that if there is a sort of an abnormal load, that would require separate licensing, and that would require an assessment of their routes and approval by them anyway. From their point of view, there wasn't a concern raised in terms of highway safety. And it should also be highlighted as well that the original concerns were primarily amenity-based. There wasn't, when the application was considered in 2009, an objection on highway safety grounds. So from a highway safety point of view, I don't think there's a substantive reason for refusal there.
Thank you. If I could just add, on the representations received, we've got a note here that says access road is a private road. Costs associated with maintenance associated heavy vehicle use has suffered damage previously. I want to ask the question, do you know why they actually allow the road to be used then? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, obviously from our point of view as the planning authority, the maintenance and management of a private access way wouldn't necessarily justify a reason for refusal. Obviously, as mentioned, the NFTC does have some interest in the land separately, and obviously can consider its position as a landowner separately, but from a planning authority perspective, there wouldn't be a justifiable reason for refusal there.
Councillor Wade. Councillor Dow first then.
Can I just confirm that the Highways Authority was focused on Endeavour Way? There's no actual consideration of West Street or Jones Lane. Is that correct?
So, I mean, obviously, the Highways Authority were asked to consult on the application as a whole. In terms of their comments specifically on sort of maintenance, would focus on the actual land falling within their control to maintain and own, which, as noted, the Hyde Marina itself is a separate sort of private access way, but they didn't raise any concerns in terms of sort of safety and accessibility on the access to the development as a whole.
Not really answered my question. I mean, the consideration was just on the site. There was no consideration of how you get to the site.
So in terms of, do you mean it? Sorry, when you say the site, do you mean the red line there, or do you mean the Hyde Marina as a whole?
Well, I just want clarity, because we've had questions about whether or not objections are valid. And the objections are, by and large, from the roads that you need to get access to get to the site, because you can't suddenly arrive at the site from nowhere. You have to get there from somewhere. And we have things like power cables over Jones Lane, if that's used. We're assuming that West Street is being used, which has blind corners, and as has been raised by a number of the objectors, who are people who use that road on a regular basis, parked cars on a already very narrow road. It has public amenity space off it. And so, we can see, we've seen pictures of Endeavour Way, and absolutely, that doesn't look like it has many issues associated with it. Because it's basically going to a commercial site. But there are the objections, by and large, are actually getting access to that site in the first place. And there are very many issues, which is why it was rejected in previous iterations. there is no material change to those access roads. West Street is still the way it is when the objections were raised and granted. Jones Lane is still the way it is when those objections were granted. And there is still access via the water to the site, which is the best way of accessing the site. Thank you.
Who's going to respond to that?
Yeah, so just to reiterate, back in 2009, when the consent was refused and then appealed, the appeal decision found that there was a sort of harmful relationship in terms of amenity, but did not find a harmful highway safety concern. So that the application and the assessment there wasn't considered on highway safety grounds. To direct you to page 186 of the report, sort of halfway down the page, there's a discussion there about the sort of Highways Authority position on the site. They haven't raised an objection to the delivery of the boats to the site by road. As I mentioned in response to the other answer, their position was there isn't currently a restriction to HGV vehicles visiting the site. They can visit the site unrestricted. In terms of the delivery of boats to the site specifically, if they fall over the categories for sort of the specific abnormal load requirements, there's a separate licensing process that's involved there. And that involves some sort of consideration of the routes and the accessibility of the roads that you're travelling along. So that would sort of fall under those remits as just a general requirement of transporting larger abnormal loads by public highway.
I accept your point about the wider use of the site. I don't recall any of the objections being for, expanding the use of the site in terms of related business. That sounds, and most people think, that sounds fair enough. It really, I think the core of it is transporting heavy and large boats by road to the site, which is still the big concern for people living in the wider area. Thank you.
Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two questions. The first one is, I heard all what you've said about why you want to do it. Is the basic reason that this authority is suggesting that we support this is because a judgment call has been made now in 2025 that was different to a judgment call that was made in 2009? That's the first question. Because I think as my colleague said, there's been no great material change in the environment. It's just that that's your opinion based on the information. I totally get that. And the other question is, could this have part of it accepted, e.g. using the buildings for, this is a general question, for other uses, but reject the transport in boats down the country lanes? That's the two questions, really.
To take those sort of 2 points, in terms of the inspector did consider when they were reviewing the site back in 2009 whether they thought there were sort of restrictions or conditions that could control the development in an acceptable fashion. I would say the sort of key assessment that we've been looking at here is we think there is a twofold aspect of the development where there is a shift away in the use of the site from the boat repair use, so there's potentially going to be less activity associated with that aspect of the use. And then also the obviously that's supported by the transport statement and the associated impacts that are going on there. And also in terms of our internal discussions with our environmental health team about whether we think we can substantiate an amenity reason for refusal, which was the primary mover of the sort of reason for refusal and the rationale for the condition being granted in the way that it was back in the 2009 appeal. Whether we think we can substantiate that amenity reason for refusal, as outlined in the report, we don't feel we currently can, and that's the sort of rationale behind which we've made this recommendation. In terms of the sort of can we consider those two elements of the use separately, obviously there is, the applicant has recommended their proposed conditions. In considering the application, we've proposed, we think, a separate suite of conditions will address those objectives from the applicant to resolve that, while still protecting the amenity of residents through the use of those two conditions. It is possible that you could choose to impose a differently worded condition if you were minded to do so, but there would have to be some consideration about what that was, how it restricted the site, making sure that we appropriately assess the impacts of the development and making sure that we're controlling the aspects of the development that we need to.
Come back on the last point. So we would essentially, if you wanted to, if that was a decision, one could reject this application and they just reapply them, or we could change it saying we reject that part, but accept the condition that the businesses could be different. They could have a chandler's shop there or something, I don't know. I'm using that as an example. Is that basically what you're saying? Just for clarification.
Sorry, Chairman, I lost the second part of that question. Would you mind putting it to us again?
Yeah, we're all lost.
I'll try and articulate it better. So what I was trying to say was that would we have to reject the application completely if we disagreed with one part but not the other? Or could we reject the part we disagree and rewrite the condition or accept the other part? That's basically what I'm trying to say.
I think your case officer set out the case as to why we are where we are. In terms of answering your question, you've got your recommendation on page 191, looking at the two conditions specifically. And I think the issue is about delivery of the boats and the use of Endeavour Way, perhaps. So that would be covered by the second condition, whereas previously, condition currently, I think it's on page 182, talks about boats only arriving and departing by sea. So it's within your gift, I think is the easy answer. It's within your gift to consider the conditions and whether you want to amend them. One option might be that you don't include condition 2 and you vary the terms of condition 1 to relate back to page 182 and have servicing and repair of boats which arrive and depart at the marina by sea. That makes sense? It varies the existing condition because it allows for the marine-related uses in Class EG, but with regards to the servicing and repair of boats, making sure that that element of the use is only still about arrival by sea. You could do that. Clearly, the case before you is that the impact is about amenity. Certainly, when you look at the history and the case officers taking to that, you've got no objection from your environmental health officers, no objection from the highway authority, and the condition 2, I would put to you, meets the tests and is reasonable and necessary.
So that's what you wish to do. You want that condition put in. No, sorry. Did you have your hand up again? No, you didn't. It was Councillor David.
I'll be honest, my hand was up for so long that I almost forgot why I had it up in the first place. I was just going to say on that was about, are there any plans to upgrade the road should it be required? Because if there's going to be an increase of traffic, I'm surprised they're not going to upgrade the road to make...
I mean, the short answer there is in the scope of this development, no. The applicant or the landowners may want to consider their own routes, but we don't think it's necessary as a conditional requirement of this development related to this development to secure any sort of obligations in that regard.
Thank you, Chair. In reference to Councillor Day's concern about access, just to reassure him, on page 180, Hampshire County Council rights of way, no objection. So as far as I can see, when I look at that, I've been told by them that every access they're talking about, rights of way, has been looked at. So that reassures me without having to ask the question. I mean, they've covered it in that, haven't they, really, as I see it? That's all I wanted to say, until we get into debate.
Okay, thank you. I think there's no more questions, so we will go into debate now. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you. Could I ask John to go into frame 94? What I just wanted to say is we've got a natural age progression on this site by the look of it. You can actually see how it's developed in time. You can see the straddle crane in the middle of the yard that actually operates the boats, so that it gives you a proportion on the size of boats they're working of and to, moving around. And can you go to 95, please? So when we look at a finished site, we're obviously looking at a much safer site which obviously obfuscates one of the concerns that people have around the access of the site. There's much better access to all the facilities. All the boats are marked in bays, whereas if you look back onto 94, you'll see that the boats have actually been stacked in front of one another, which safety-wise is an issue as far as I'm concerned. So there's a much better site improvement, safety-wise. But on the streets themselves, if we take big loads onto those sites, there is a rule that you have to have a banksman to see you in and out of these sites. So there's no way that there'd be a risk to children in the event that something heavy comes through there. So I don't think there's an issue on that.
Sir Davis.
Thank you. Councillor Wade was first, but we'll take beauty before age on this regard. I come from obviously Lymington and Pennington. We have similar issues with boats going through narrow country roads, and even in the built-up areas, we have difficulties with boats going down narrow urban streets. I do have a lot of sympathy for the people in these roads, because it is, I mean, these are big lumbering beasts at the end of the day, and it will cause a quite significant impact on the local community. I do wonder whether trying to push them towards the sea, not literally, but trying to push them towards the sea access makes far more sense. And I wonder if that is something that we can put into the condition, rather than having them come down the narrow roads, because there are a lot of narrow country lanes in that particular part of Hythe and Dibden.
Remarking on this.
Just very quickly, if I can just pick up on that point, and I'm mindful of, I've tried to give some advice to members about conditions and how you could vary it, but I think it's really important when you're thinking about the travel impact to consider the narrative that's in your report, specifically page 186, that starts on page 185 and goes through the assessment, and you'll see there that as a result of the change in use, there may be, top of page 186, a net increase. But the middle table on that page is really helpful in terms of the light goods and the heavy goods vehicle movements, the bits that we're concerned about, getting down Jones Lane, West Lane. Jones Lane, coincidentally, takes buses over the train bridge as they go into the village and the ferry terminal. There's a reduction there. And that's part of the narrative in terms of why the Highway Authority have come to the view that the traffic impact is one, and it says on balance in your report, is acceptable. Going back to the planning history as well, that the case officer's taken you to, previously, it wasn't so much about traffic generation, it was about the amenity impact on the residents from those traffic movements. And now you've got no objection from your environmental health officers as well. So I just want you to be mindful of that part of the report, specifically the table in the middle of page 186, where there's that negative column on the end of the light goods and heavy goods vehicle movement table. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. This actually is a lot more complex issue than we're led to believe. Now, I'll give you a little bit of history on this. Hythe and Dibden, and this is on the west of them, have another marine site on the east of in the southern part of the village. And Highways said the only way traffic can reach that is go along the A326 to Hardley Roundabout, turn down Fawley Road, and then go down Frost Lane to get it. Because the roads through the centre of Hythe are not suitable for HGV traffic. Now, even before we get to the roads mentioned, these boats will have to come on the A326 because it's the only road in and out of town, in and out of the area. Then they will come to Dibden Roundabout. Dibden Roundabout, when you will turn left, because that's the only way to get onto Main Road, onto Southampton Road to reach this location, has a very large hill that is unsuitable for HGVs and certainly unsuitable for boats on a low loader. It just is not an appropriate road for HGVs of that size. Then you travel along Southampton Road, you come to West Street. It's a tiny country lane with no pavement on either side, totally unsuitable for HGVs, and an extreme, and I mean extreme, right-hand bend. And you've got to go round that then past a load of parked cars, a play area and a housing estate, then a sharp left-hand bend, then an extreme right-hand bend, then to turn left to get onto Marina. Now, I used to work in transport many years ago. I can tell you that's an accident waiting to happen, because out of 10 times, someone's going to have a mistake. But if they want to go the other way, they've still to go over Dibden Hill to get down Jones's Lane. To get down Jones's Lane, you've got to navigate between buses, parked cars, and a considerable number of elderly residents who can cross the road. That is not a practical route for a HGV carrying a large boat. Then he has a sharp left-hand turn, and then they go over the bridge, which did collapse a couple of years ago, the only route in and out of Marina. Now, that bit of highway there is perfectly okay for an HGV going down. And the pictures that you showed were perfectly fine for an HGV to go around. Realistically, no one in common sense is going to look at bringing HGVs on this route. Highways, and we've had that from the highway officer, Hampshire County Council, they will only put in a clear objection if they see a significant safety issue. We don't base it on driver competence. Now, if we accept that highways haven't worried, but highways haven't looked at the wider picture. They will only look at the specific bit we're dealing with. Now, I quite understand the developer wanting to use his empty buildings for something. I get that. But what we've got to look at, he is going, or she could be, they're going to sell these buildings to somebody else. And that somebody else will decide what his or her business plan is and how many boats they want to bring in. So projected figures here are meaningless because we don't know who's going to buy them and what they're going to do. But clearly their objective is to sell them for somebody to go and build larger boats. And answer your point about the crane, if they invest in that, they just get a bigger crane lift. And I've been and seen it. That crane lift can lift some significant boats. I've been there. I know the area very well. Clearly, this is an unsuitable application for its location. By all means, bring the boats in by water, and let's face it, it's greener. And aren't we in a green council? It ticks all the green boxes, bring them in by water. I cannot support this application, therefore I propose we refuse it.
Thank you. I will come back for a second, but I'll go to Councillor Sleep.
Can I just thank Councillor Google? That was a very good plan into the site. But what I'd just like to say is what you've done is you've just presented a perfect case for arguing that the opportunity of getting the boats that you imagine into there isn't going to happen. Because if I'm a haulage company and I want to get down onto that site, I will be telling the company we can't get them down that way. So automatically you've cancelled the concern on the job. If we passed it now with the approval and they can't get the boats down, it's not going to happen.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Rich.
Well, I just note that it was the planning inspector from the previous appeal who suggested that condition that the boats should be brought in by sea, and I think that, you know, I agree with the planning inspector and we should keep that condition.
Thank you. We do have a proposal to refuse this, but I'll need a seconder for that. Councillor Davies, and reasons, please.
It's the road infrastructure into the site is inappropriate for HGV traffic. And I refer back to the previous planning inspector back in 2009. So we're just supplementing what the government inspector already said. Chairman, I could modify that message that we are quite happy to see some positive use for the remaining buildings that doesn't require HGV traffic bringing boats in. So I will be, to take on the point that Mark Wyatt mentioned earlier, I'll be happy for the condition for the buildings to be developed into some nautical business that doesn't require HGV traffic entering that site.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I will. Thinking about the reason and road infrastructure is inappropriate for HGVs and specific traffic, your report and the case officers were taking you to the fact that the appeal decision and the findings of the inspector who said boats should arrive by sea was, and I'm on page 182 of your agenda, it was about the frequency of boats being brought to the site by road and the potentially harmful impact this would have on balconies and amenity spaces in proximity to Endeavour Way. So the inspector has said, deliver boats by sea due to amenity impact. He doesn't make reference, I'm assuming it's a he, they don't make reference to the issue of access. And I've just been passed the decision notice from the inspector, and he says the number of lorry movements does not seem to be an excessive number in itself, but must be considered in the context of the high quality scheme. And he goes on to talk about the neighbouring amenity impact. So even if you go back to the appeal decision, and I think Councillor Wade, you referred to the inspector's decision, it wasn't dismissed, or the condition wasn't varied on the basis of road infrastructure. It was based on the impact on neighbouring amenity.
Jim, can I come back on that? Part of this application is to sell those buildings to a new business. So we do not know what the new business is likely to project in vehicle movements, but we don't know. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but we don't know what the future holds. So therefore, we need to protect the residents and the amenity, I have a good point about that, and the road infrastructure from this dangerous situation.
Chairman, page 184, 185 of your report looks at the highway impacts, specifically related to the uses. There's some comparisons in the report about the trip generation relative to the floor space, and an example or a comparator has been used over at Hayling Island relative to the floor space. So the floor space itself of the building is going to hopefully have some implication on what you can do and what capacity you have to grow a building. You've also got the use classes on class EG 1, 2 and 3 at the top of page 84. Those are uses that should be carried out, the old B1 uses should be carried out in a residential area without detriment to its amenity. So those uses and the limitation on the floor area of the buildings goes some way to helping understand the traffic movements and the modelling that goes with that. I've taken you already to the page 186, where the movements are modelled and tabulated for you, and you've already heard, I'm telling you stuff you already know. There's no technical objection from the Highway Authority. And I read the report in terms of them reviewing the proposal by road, and if you get those big HGVs, the low loaders, trying to negotiate the Dibden roundabout, the Southampton Road, Jones Lane, page 186 says in such cases there needs to be an abnormal road licence, and the county councillor's highway authority can grapple with that as and when applications are made. So I struggle, I must admit, I struggle with a road infrastructure being inappropriate as a reason for refusal, but it's wholly within your gift. If you do pursue it, I will need a policy, please.
Can I just come back on one point? Not all boats are worked on in a building. They're often worked on in the yard because they're too big to fit into a building. So I don't necessarily agree that the size of the building relates to the size of the boat that they're going to deal with. And I'm just thinking of protecting the existing environment, the amenity of the local residents, and the safety of the residents. I think HGV traffic down that road is not appropriate.
Councillor David.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of my own concern was about amenity for local residents, specifically on Endeavour Way. But I can't remember the policy number. Is it ENV3 on that one?
Chairman, ENV3 would be your key policy for amenity, and I know I've asked previously in this meeting and others for some help with the reason for refusal, but you do, in this case, quite helpfully, on page 182, where the case has gone through the history, they've given you the reason for refusal from back in 2009 when that resulted in the appeal proposal. It's right in the middle in italics, and that was about residential amenity impacts, going back to my other point a minute ago, but it talks about the movement of boats to and from the site in close proximity to residential properties on the marina would likely result in increase in noise levels and disturbance to the detriment of the amenities of residential properties. Clearly, policy landscape's evolved and moved on. We're not working on that plan. You're working on ENB3 now, but the principles are the same. So you could borrow from that, but it does mean we're looking at amenity more so than the traffic impact. Although I also, like I've said to Councillor Wade, you've got no technical objection from your environmental health colleagues.
Thank you. May I perhaps ask Councillor Wade, rather than make this into a negative and perhaps throw the baby out with the bathwater, that you actually asked the officer right at the beginning, we could allow the flexibility of use, which is always good to see units being used, and you actually said, and it was agreed that we could put in the caveat that any boats that would require an HGV be delivered by sea. That actually turns what you've got now, a very blunt refusal, into a positive that still gets exactly what you want and protects the actual residents of the marina. I'm just asking whether maybe you wish to alter it slightly.
Actually, I think Councillor Frampton has made a very, very valid point. I did say at the beginning, I'm not objecting to the using those buildings in the business, and I wasn't objecting to them being brought in by boats being brought in by sea, because that is an existing thing that still exists. By objecting to them being brought by road, they still are able to come in by sea, so they could bring as many boats as they like in by sea, but not by road. So the two things are not in contradiction. So I follow that. Well, though there's refusal to, I'm happy to amend it to allow development. I did say that of the two buildings, but against the HGV traffic. So only boats coming in by road.
So can I clarify? Can I clarify that's an amendment? Can I clarify? So that would be an amendment then. I would need to know, as seconder of that, I'd need to know what the
I didn't have, did you hear that? I didn't have my mic on.
Yeah, I heard that, yeah.
Okay. Sorry?
Can I clarify that?
Yeah. We clarify that.
So, just to be clear then, that motion to refuse has been amended by the proposer and the seconder. So look at the conditions on page 191. And what I understand now is that condition 1 would be the buildings should only be used for marine-related businesses falling within use class EG or for the servicing and repair of boats which are to arrive and depart from the marina by sea. Yeah, and for no other purpose, and the condition will then follow, we'll delete condition 2.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to be in agreement.
If there's nothing more to be said, we'll go back to the speaker. So you have 1 minute to respond. So first of all, come to Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the focus on local amenity and also the HGV movements. Now, the material change since the decision in 2009 is that before the inspector at that point in time, the site, this was a B2, general industrial use. We're shifting away from that now. We're looking at a class EG use, which is completely different. So at the moment, yes, there's unrestricted HGV movements. We're looking at uses that are research and development, marine related, light industrial and office. Now, they tend to generate light goods vehicles and cars. So just to give you a bit of comfort, members, we're not looking at HGV movements here. And in your report on 186, as officers have mentioned, we've got typical weekday HGV movement proposed at 0, where currently there are there are 6. So hopefully that gives you a bit of comfort on the HGV. And just to reiterate officers' comments, no objection from the Highways Authority who have supported that transport assessment. Thank you, Chair.
Very much. Mr Stubbs, you have 1 minute to respond.
Thank you. The Residents' Association have suggested an alternative set of conditions, which is exactly in line, I believe, with what Councillor Wade is, and indeed gives a slightly wider use case than EG, which we would be happy with. Our sole concern is over the frequent transportation of boats. And if, while illogical, the proposed reduction in the HGV traffic is to 0, and given the statements from the applicant that they have no intention of letting business to these, we can see no issue with retaining the condition that prevents delivery of large boats by road to this specific location. And that protects the amenity and has the full support of the Residents' Association of the Marina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So you're proposing this new recommendation is to grant with the revised conditions, yes? Yes. Thank you. And you're seconding it still, okay. So with that then we'll go ahead with the vote. So all of those in favour of the vote, of the granting with the revised conditions, please vote now. Thank you. Okay, so that's granted. You have 8 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. That's been granted then. Thank you very much for your time. We now come to our last application, which is a TPO. Okay. Stretch. Okay, we go ahead then with this TPO stroke 0003 stroke 25. This is land at 1 Burley Close, Barton-on-Sea, New Milton. And it's to confirm the tree preservation order. Objections received that remain unsolved. And this is page 193 of your agenda. We have one speaker, Mr. Richard Dawson, who is the tree order. And we will come to you after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Chalmers. I'm representing the tree team today. So we're bringing forward this to the committee, this tree preservation order on the land at 1 Burley Close in Barton-on-Sea. Sorry, I'm driving this today, so there we go. So that is the new tree that's been TPO'd, T1 of the order. And in context, that's the overall view of the estate with a number of other protected trees in the vicinity. And the aerial view of 1 Burley Close is just there, a little bit far out. And here's a picture of the plan with the schedule specifying the tree, its location, and plan showing where it is in relation to the adjacent properties. So this tree is actually a replacement tree. There's an old tree preservation that covers a lot of this estate, which was in place as part of the Nash Caravan Holiday Park, and it was put on prior to the estate being developed. And as part of the design and the overall development in the past, the trees were accounted for and the estate was designed around them. The original tree was a Monterey pine, which are very fast-growing species, and they can become problematic as they get older. And in 2012, consent was granted by NFDC for this tree to be felled due to structural defects within the tree, and to replace the loss of amenity that would result in the loss of the tree. replacement pine tree was conditioned. And that's the original order. And this is the replacement pine tree, which is planted, well, after 2012. So my colleague has put down here 2014. The original specification was for a type of tree called a stone pine. This tree actually isn't a stone pine, we don't believe. We think it's a Corsican pine. Pine trees, particularly when they're young, are quite difficult to identify. You have to count the number of needles and things, but we're pretty confident that this is a Corsican pine. Corsican pine, yeah. So Corsican pines, like Monterey pines, are very tolerant of coastal locations. And sort of, you'll see all along the south coast, in Bournemouth and Hampshire, Dorset, a lot of the big pine trees you'll see are either Monterey pines or Corsicans. And here's the context of its situation. It's sort of in a prominent position at the front of properties, a sort of focal point of Burley Close. So the circumstance of creating the TPO was when the current owner of the land trees growing on contacted the council to ask if they could remove it. There's a bit of a grey area. Years ago, when you conditioned a replacement tree, they were automatically TPO'd, covered by TPO. That changed back in 2010 when the legislation of TPOs was changed. So it was only protected by the conditions, which only last about 2 years after a tree's been planted. So the tree wasn't protected, and as an authority, we felt that the immunity it provided and the character of the estate, that this tree should be maintained and protected for the future. Therefore, a new TPO was made. There's two ways. You could either vary the existing order to include a new tree, or you can make a new tree preservation. And in this case, where the old TPO or original TPO is so vast, to vary that order would require reserving a TPO on multiple properties. So in this instance, we made a new tree preservation order. Some close-up pictures of the tree. And as a result, neighbouring properties were invited to comment on the TPO. And as we received 5 letters of objection, no letters of support, and therefore we weren't able to resolve these objections. So this is why we brought this TPO to you today, to listen to an objector and to obviously make a decision. But we would recommend that this tree is TPO for future. It's got a good level of amenity. Whoops, how do I get back? See, just check operate these things. I should have had a driving lesson before I started. It's in context of the estate. The tree is a reasonable species for its location, and we feel like it currently contributes high immunity to the area, but will also have greater immunity in the future. So, there we go. Okay.
Mr. Dawson, you have 3 minutes to put your case. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Firstly, the officer's report, while comprehensive and detailed, did miss some of the key objections that both my neighbours and I had lodged. While it's noted that the tree is in good health and proportion, the majority of the community currently feels that the tree is too large and becoming larger each year for the small cluster of 10 houses. For information, I purchased 1 Burley Close in 2016. The original tree had been removed and a new tree had been planted. The house was rented at that time, and the owners did not live or near the property. The tree in 2016 was about 5 foot high. Today, I estimate the tree to be 30 to 40 foot and under 5 metres away from my house. At the time of replanting, which I believe was 2015, I believe there was a choice of tree that could have been replanted. It's not clear who or why the current fast-growing pine variety was selected or chosen. Number 2 Burley Close has also noted that the replacement tree was not planted in the exact location. It's now 1.5 metres closer to his property, and this has now become a point of contention. Not 100 feet from my property, 2 existing TPO protected pines were recently removed, I believe last year, and the 2 trees have been replanted. These are not fast-growing pines. The 3 houses that surround these trees have created a beautiful garden. In addition, now that the large pines have been removed, 2 of the properties have actually had south-facing solar panels installed, an option previously unavailable to them. My plan is to remove the tree and replant 1 or 2 trees that would be more in proportion to my and my neighbours' gardens and road, soften the landscape of the garden, allowing for more diverse planting, and enhance visual appeal that will change with the seasons, and notably support more wildlife. I would expect these trees to be subject to a TPO. By retaining the current tree, my garden and my neighbour's garden will become little more than scrubland beneath, dominated by a single pine, and in our view would not contribute to the amenity of the area. The report does not highlight that retaining the tree will impede on other homeowners, such as my neighbours, that won't be able to have south-facing solar panels. While I agree that the tree provides a positive contribution to the amenity of the area, the report has failed to consider the surroundings and needs of everyone that lives in Burley Close, and it's felt that a replacement that's in keeping would equally provide the same contribution. It's not my intention to remove the tree and hard landscape my garden. I would welcome the opportunity to work with the council to ensure a positive outcome. Many thanks.
Thank you very much. Can I have questions, please? Councillor Davies.
Sorry, can we go back to an image of the garden, please? Yeah, it does look very barren. I would just wonder, is there any way that removing the tree and perhaps working with the resident to try and make it a bit more diverse might work? It looks a bit, I like the tree, it looks nice, but it does look very out of place. And I just wondered, is there a way of trying to improve biodiversity there?
From my perspective, that would be out of the context of what we could reasonably do under the Town and Country Planning Act and under the powers we have under a tree preservation order. So how a resident chooses, what they choose to grow in their gardens, up to them.
Councillor Sleep.
Yeah, just a couple of questions to the tree lady. The Corsican pine, I understand from reading the write-up, was actually slower growing than the original tree that was there. Is that correct, or is it?
That is correct, yeah. Monterey pines are extremely fast-growing trees, but Corsicans are fairly rapid, but they do have a sort of a life, over their lifespan, they change how quickly they grow. So initially trees grow very fast, they've evolved to get up to the, in a woodland, for example, to get up to that sort of, to the light quicker, and then they sort of slow down as they get older. But this is a reasonably quick growing species, but not at the scale that Monterey pine is.
If I may, one other question. We look at oak trees and we know the spread of the root structure is the same as the spread of the branches, and we've got a house that's quite adjacent. But there's my understanding that the actual root ball on these fir trees is very close. When they go over, you can see normally just what sort of diameter it actually turns up. So there isn't an issue with the rooting towards this house, is there? So
when it comes to actual root spread, if you're looking from subsidence, which is traditionally what people worry about with root spread in buildings, the zone of influence a tree can take is up to 30 metres away. So it's actually a lot further than the crown spread of a tree can potentially be. However, most trees are also very shallow rooted. So very rarely do trees root below 2 metres of surface level. Some species would, like eucalyptus, but not that many. So, so the likelihood is this tree will have quite shallow but wide spreading roots. When it comes to damage to buildings, there's lots of factors, but this particular area being in Barton-on-Sea is likely to be on a relatively acid sand-based soil. So the fact you have to have a shrinkable soil, that traditionally isn't a shrinkable soil. Also, pine trees, including Corsican pines, are called a low water demand species. So their roots suck up a lot less water than an oak tree, which is a very high water demand species. So the likelihood of this tree causing subsidence damage to property is a lot lower than if it was an oak tree, for example. I mean, I'm not a structural engineer, I can't categorically give you a definitive answer, but the risks are lower with this species than perhaps a poplar or an oak.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
I've got a couple of questions. When the original tree was cut down and someone decided to put this, I mean, this is not the normal type of tree we put on this type of estate, is it? I mean, and the reason I asked that, because I noticed there's a block paving in the highway, and there's an estate not far from where I used to live, where similar trees were put, and you're right, the shallow roots, but they went and pushed the block paving up in the highway, which is an issue that can happen when you're in this sort of environment. So I just wonder, why was that, was it just a mistake that tree was picked? Because we would normally put a different species that's quite less invasive, wouldn't we, in that space?
When it comes to replacement planting, we, as an authority, we generally try and be fairly flexible because we are mindful of the fact that it is people's gardens and they might have a particular preference for type of tree. However, we also are looking to replace the amenity that's been lost by the original tree that's been removed. So we're planting what was a very large mature pine tree, which was accounted for in the state was constructed and designed, with a very small growing, like an Amelanchier, which will only ever reach a maximum of 5 to 6 metres, wouldn't really be a suitable replacement. And if you want, the larger the tree you can get in a space, the bigger the benefit from a climate change point of view. So pine trees are particularly good at rainwater attenuation. They've got massive surface areas because they're needles, so they slow rainwater down considerably. And you get the bigger the shading impact, which I know can be a negative, but also can be a positive when you're trying to cool areas down. In results, the block paving, trees can lift, and block paving is problematic with all species of trees. However, there's no evidence to suggest that this tree is causing any problems at the moment. And I've seen plenty of small cherry trees lift block paviers as well. So you'd have to take that on a case-by-case basis. And in the future, if this was to become a problem, then obviously you'd have to look at an application then. And maybe that would be substantial enough to remove the tree potentially, or there might be alternative ways of repairing without resulting in the loss of a tree. But currently there's nothing to suggest that this tree is causing damage to either the paving or to the adjacent buildings.
You mentioned that the advantages against climate change because of the tree. I believe that the resident suggested that if we knock the tree down and put 2 other trees down to replacements, which would be on TPOs, it would be slightly less invasive species. Would they still give the same amount or more benefit towards climate change?
So just to clarify, when we say invasive species, we're talking about species that spread wildlife. So this isn't an invasive species. It won't start seed itself around, but it will grow large and encroach, and potentially can come encroaching. But so the 2-for-1 argument is quite often used. Like if I was one big tree and put 2 small trees in, then that sort of we've paid. It's mitigated the loss of that tree. From a sort of environmental and sustainability, one big tree generally outweighs 2 small little trees. It kind of depends what you're looking to plant for. So if you're looking for pollinators and support pollinators, you probably wouldn't plant a pine tree. You'd plant either a lime tree or a flowering that's not double, a single flowering tree. But if you're looking for rainwater attenuation, sort of cooling of the urban heat island effect, or other advantages like pollution sort of filtering, this sort of species would be the preferred species. So it's kind of, there's always a tree for the right place. And this is the argument, the crux of this argument, is this tree the right place? We believe it is, however, the residents believe it isn't. So it's a judgment, yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Yeah, so let me just get this right. If we remove the TPO, there is a chance that the resident might then plant more biodiverse trees, more interesting trees, but there's also a chance they won't. And so we've got to effectively take that judgment call. Whereas if we do keep the TPO, there's obviously the guarantee of the tree remaining. So that's effectively, we've got the risk of saying we might get something better or we might get something worse versus we know what this is.
So if the tree is not protected, we can't then condition. So say 5 years, 10 years down the line, there's a major problem with the tree, or the tree dies, whatever. We could condition a replacement tree and get another tree planted in that spot. Without that TPA there, we can't condition through the town and country planning at the replacement tree. That's not to say that the residents aren't genuine in their intention to replant. So if we want the council to have sort of control, if you like, of potential future tree planting, would be by the tree preservation order. But yeah, so I hope I've answered your question. Okay.
Councillor Sleep.
Yeah, can I just say that reading the write-up, the site existed on the seaside, and it was Monterey pines everywhere in those days historically. So we've got a situation where Monterey pines on the caravan site existed. They've been there for a long time. This tree was replaced with a slower growing Corsican pine so that the conditions on the hazes wouldn't be as dramatic to put the original tree back. But we're actually trying to keep in context with the trees around the area, the pine trees around the area, aren't we?
Yes, that would be why a pine tree was suggested as a conditioned replacement tree to keep that sort of character of the area and the Monterey pines. Throughout this estate and numerous places throughout the district, we are getting to the stage we are losing a lot of Monterey pines. They are beginning to get to the end of their useful life expectancy where they can be safely retained. And we wouldn't normally condition a Monterey pine to go back in because they are fast growing and they can become problematic. We would often go for a species like a Corsican, if it's a maritime, or a Scots pine, if it's a little bit more inland, as they're generally a little bit more friendlier to neighbours and still give a similar sort of landscape character as the tree that was originally there.
Are there any more questions? Then we're going to debate. Does anybody else have anything to say? In that case, I will need a proposal for the recommendation, but I will come back to the speaker. You have 1 minute to respond. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments. I think the key point is, you know, if you built a new housing estate now, would you plant one of these trees in your front garden? No. I've also given the example of the houses just around the corner that have had 2 Monterey pines removed. They haven't had 2 of these put back in their garden. They've had 2 other trees. I can't confirm which species. So this is my question. And this is why I want to actually remove this tree and fit something else that's more in keeping with the close going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. The recommendation is to confirm the tree preservation order, and I will need a proposer and a seconder. Proposed Councillor Sleep, seconded by Councillor Richards. So we will go to the vote then. Okay. Not come up on the screen. Okay. Oh, there we are. 8 to confirm the TPO. 1 against and 1 abstained. So that's been confirmed. Thank you very much. That brings an end to the meeting. Thank you all very much. It's been quite a long morning, so thank you.